fill the time.
Do, 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 do.
And we got the yellow sign. All right, we are live on air. Hey, everyone. And welcome to a hangout that I'm having with Naomi. And can I just say, your channel is called, what officially? For those who want to...
Just Crazyhair, and it's YouTube/C/Crazyhair official, or you can just go to crazyhair.com and all the links are there.
Well, there you go. So I kind of so my YouTube world is I watch my friends' content, and then I have a lot of other content I watch, but I don't spend a lot of time sort of scouring YouTube for other kind of content. I like to watch when I relax, like history documentaries and god-awful movie podcasts and things like that. So I didn't know of you before VidCon and the controversy around VidCon, which you talked about on the Willy Bumblebee channel. And if people want to hear that, I would recommend you guys go watch that. It's a really great hangout. I had to break it up into pieces to hear it all before our hangout tonight, but I really enjoyed listening to it. It was really a good chat. Like, a lot of topics were discussed. So because I only sort of knew about you from VidCon, and I think a lot of people probably got to know you because of that stuff. You're not just the VidCon thing, so I wanted to talk to you about you and who you are, and the things that you care about and believe in before we kind of go on. And so introduce yourself a little bit that way, like your channel, what motivated you to start it, and what kind of things did you do with it, and what kind of things are you doing with it, and what kind of things would you like to do with it?
So I started my channel because I moved from a very, very big city. It's called Vaughan. It's above the city of Toronto. That's even their stupid like slogan, like Vaughan, the city above Toronto. So I moved from there, which has a population of a few million, to this small island. It's a province in Canada. It's the smallest province in Canada. 135,000 live on this island, and 30,000 of those live in the city, Charlottetown, which is the capital. So it's very hard to really find a niche group of people for everything here. I have made some really good friends here, mostly the girlfriends of my partner, and his coworkers and stuff like that. So I can talk to them about a lot of really intelligent stuff, but there's only so much that they can stand. I'm sure that the people at home have to deal with that too. So basically, if I could bring up the election for a total of 5 minutes every time we interacted. And after that, it was like, okay, next topic. And we're not going back to the election. And I'd just be like, no, I want to talk about how funny the primaries are. So I thought, like, oh, okay, you know what? Like, all of this stuff that I want to talk about, all these ideas that I want to examine that my friends just can't deal with, and even my friends back home from Vaughan, like, there's only so much that you can talk to, like, when you're on Skype with them, right? I want to hear about their boyfriends, their love lives, their new puppies. I don't just want to talk politics all the time. So I thought, I'll turn on the camera, I'll talk to the camera about my opinions, and I'll post it online, and that'll be my, like, just getting it out of my system. So that's how the channel started. And I know that you guys are not fans of each other, but at VidCon, that was actually one of the questions that Carl Benjamin had asked me. And when I told him this, he's like, yeah, that's why I started my channel too. So I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, we have something in common, except we disagree on a lot of that other stuff. But I didn't bring that part up. So that's why I started my channel. And the more, like, and people who have listened to the Willy Bumblebee stream know this, but I'll just repeat it a little here, that I got a lot of flack during VidCon for kind of wanting to, like, bring it back down. So, like, when people would say things like, yeah, she should just kill herself, the world will be a better place without X. And I'm like, that's not cool. Like, let's not do that. Or, like, one time I suggested to, like, somebody that maybe they should apologize to so-and-so about something that they said about their relationship, and maybe that will make that person hate them less because they were complaining about how much those people hated them. And then they, like, snapped at me, like, why should I apologize? And like, okay, I guess I'm just gonna shut up about that. So,
Yikes. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, on that, I can relate to having conversations on YouTube that you can't have with people in your ordinary life. And I know when I went to university, more so when I went for my master's and my PhD, because I was in a program with other people who were also interested in politics, and we weren't all necessarily interested in the same parts of politics, but they touched enough where you could kind of vaguely know on a topic, and then your friend would start talking about their research and what they were doing for their PhD, and you would learn a lot from that conversation just by listening to them being passionate about something that you were also sort of vaguely interested in, and then you learned about that topic too. And when I left university, that was probably the hardest part of my transition to leaving academia, was just I had become used to access to those kinds of conversations, whether it was people in the government department or hanging out with people from the philosophy department and hearing about all the kind of crazy ideas that go on in continental philosophy and being intrigued by some of them and just like nah on other ones. And when I left academia to take up a job where I am now, which is related to the social sciences, but it's not a university setting. We still have discussions, but they're not kind of the same discussions. It's more like an office setting than it is a department at a university. And so when I came onto YouTube and got to meet people like Kevin Logan and Michael Rollins and Tim, I started having those conversations that I really enjoyed again. Like I could sit down with somebody whose opinion I didn't necessarily agree with, but we're both coming from a good place and we could reasonably disagree. But most of the time we kind of agreed on the core stuff and then exchanged our opinions on it. And I do think that in that way, yes, YouTube can give you friends and connections with people that are halfway across the world, but don't feel nearly that far away.
Yeah, that sums it up perfectly. Just connecting with people that I'm a naive moron. I'm still kind of a naive moron. I'm a very gullible person, to the point where sometimes when people are making a joke or saying something sarcastically, I'll have to look at them and say, are you joking? Because I don't know if you're joking or not. Like, can you clarify that for me? So I was under the impression that that's what we were here to do. It was called the Great Debate Community. I do have a background from high school and university in the debate community, so I assumed to my detriment that these people were all open to having those kinds of conversations, and I guess I was wrong.
Sorry, I didn't mean to go. I hit the wrong button there.
That's okay.
Well, I think it's there's a range of topics, and I think it's easier to talk about some topics more than others with people. And I mean, I don't want to make that too negative. I want to stay more positive here. So, what are the things that you're doing with your channel now, and what are you looking to where do you want to take it going forward?
I have this. I don't know if this is like a direct answer, but it kind of answers it. I have this, you know how Twitter lets you have a moments where you can add certain tweets to your moments, and you can like create different lists for things and add. It's something that not a lot of people use, but I created one called "What is this madness?" And every time I see something that I just go like, "There's no way I can reason with this person, but I definitely like need to document this for later," I add crazy shit to my what is this madness list. And like when it comes to like things that I feel more passionate about it, that I have to say something, that's when I create a video about it. So when I have this urge to not just kind of like take it apart in my mind, when I feel like I've taken it apart, I've thought about it, and now I have something to say about it, that's when I create a video. So I don't just troll the internet looking for content. My videos come out on Tuesdays. Sometimes I'll film like 3 videos in a week and schedule them to come out on the next 3 Tuesdays. And sometimes I like miss a week and I'm like, whatever. Like nobody's paying me to do this. I do this for fun.
Yeah, you're much more routinized. You have a better routine. I'm so random. I just put things up at literally no schedule. Like when I get it done is when it goes up. Like my viewers just have to like check back. Every day is a lottery with my channel. But on the other hand, because I'm doing something usually in the moment where I've got the time to do it and I'm quite interested, you know, like making time for a hangout, and they get out of me because well, one, I've been doing a lot more hangouts lately, but yeah, I just sort of do it in these bursts, and so it's probably better for the YouTube algorithms and the promotion of your channel. You're being much more tactical than I am. But I'm the kind of person who I can't buy people presents until the very last minute because I get so excited about what I want to give them for their birthday or for Christmas or whatever. And I want to like give it to them. Like, you can be surprised right now. I just want to go ahead, have it, open it, go. So yeah, I have no patience with those kinds of things.
I used to be like that with presents when I was younger. I'd be like, holy shit, like can't I just give my dad his birthday present right now? Like, why do I have to wait?
I know. It's torture for me.
So I get where you're coming from. It's just that in the beginning, it's like that. Like when you finish editing a video and you've got like 4 audio tracks and like 12 video tracks that are all like possibly split together like properly and with transitions and everything, you're like, oh, I put so much effort into this, I need to show the world right now. But then I kind of like go in and upload it and tag it and schedule it, and I'm like, just wait. If you bombard, I hate that. I hate going on my YouTube and finding like that somebody moved their channel, and when people move their channel, they re-upload all their shit, and I'm like,
oh yeah,
flooded with all of their content in my subscriber list. It's just like obnoxious.
Yeah, Kevin Logan had that a few months back, and you know, I do love Kevin's content, but I only want to watch it like usually maybe once or twice or a third time if I have to, like if I'm remembering something I saw in it and I want to remind myself or get the clip. But yeah, I don't need to see his entire, you know, body of work again in my subscription feed.
Yeah.
Sorry, Kev. Well, that's when, like,
honestly,
with the backup channels, got to go and unsub the backup channel and give it like 2 months and then go and sub the backup channel again. That's the other option.
In the spirit of full disclosure, I've never interacted with Kevin Logan. I've only seen the silly clips that Bearings included on his videos and stuff like that, and the massacre Kevin Logan to Lacey Green thing that happened a while back that I ignored. But I saw that, I mean, and again, like those of you who have seen the Woolly Bumblebee stream understand, like when you're so close to something so hurtful as what happened to me at VidCon with those people making all those accusations that they have zero evidence for up and not retracting them, and you see a stream where somebody has Blair White and Kevin Logan on at the same time, I kind of automatically went, A, I'm not watching that because it'll be full of hurtful stuff, and B, like, what's this? Like, this guy doesn't look like he fits there. Like, what's he gonna do there? And then I'm kind of hesitant because I saw his face in a thumbnail. Like, can I trust that, like, he's going to give me like a fair chance? So that's where I stand kind of with Kevin Logan. Like, I don't know him. I'm weary, but also my personality puts me in a place where I'm like, I want to give him a chance, but I've never had the option to.
Sure. Well, I would say, from whatever my word is worth, I will vouch for Kevin. I don't ever recall ever seeing him or hearing him say anything negative about you. I don't know to what extent you're on his radar at all. But, you know, in terms of, like, if you wanted to do a hangout with him, he's way chill. I would say, you know, check out some of his content. He's actually, well, before Sargon went kind of, you know, drifting further and further alt-light to alt-right in terms of, you know, some of the content he's been putting out lately. Kevin and Sargon were frenemies. They would do hangouts and argue back and forth time to time. So he's completely chill in terms of hanging out with people, and especially of different opinions. He wants to have dialogues. I think that's very much where he's coming from. I just think that a lot of stuff on YouTube is so toxic that it's about rather than actually exchanging ideas.
Yeah, the gotcha culture.
Yeah,
the gotcha culture is terrible.
Yeah, actually, he's just done he did a hangout with someone who's more like a right-leaning YouTuber, and he mirrored it on his channel. So if you want to hear him dealing with somebody from the other side, from, like, you know, the right side, and Kevin's definitely on the political left, just to get a sense of how he handles himself, you'll hear his very mellow Birmingham accent kind of rolling through the video. Yeah, so that would be my recommendation. If I can make an introduction, I'm happy to do that.
I'll give it a shot. I always tell, oh, my boyfriend's so tired of hearing this. I'll try anything twice, because the first time you might hate it because you have like all these preconceived notions about it, and then you might like it because then you're coming to it from a place where you've had an experience with it before.
Yeah, he actually did a hangout with, do you know War Corp 666?
I'm very bad at names and screen names. Maybe I've interacted with the person before.
That's okay. He's an anti-feminist YouTuber. He's not very big, but he's prolific in his content. And he and Kevin had a discussion. You know, it was supposed to be a debate, but it was just those two in a hangout, not any sort of formal debate. And that would also be like, you know, in terms of like somebody that he could possibly disagree with. He's still totally mellow and calm. So yeah, I can, again, sorry, not to just keep pushing it, but I can say that you would have a very positive, friendly chat with Kevin.
I trust you. Speaking of debates, I did watch the entirety of your debate with Sargon on the topic of, I think it was, does feminism contribute positively to the world?
Was that feminism good for the world?
Yeah,
it was a rephrase of the Blair Kitchens "Is religion good for the world?" debate. Yeah.
And I liked how Carl was big enough to admit that he didn't do great in terms of actually debating the topic. And I felt like the reason that debate didn't go so well was because both of you were arguing different positions. So like one of you was talking about whether or not there's an atmosphere around the world, and one of you was discussing whether or not the sun affects the earth. So like there were two completely different things being discussed. And so like watching that, I'm just thinking like with my debate background, I'm like, guys. So I would have loved to see like a follow-up to that, but I understand with everything that's conspired how that would
I did offer him a follow-up. Well, no, not anymore, but right afterwards there was talk. He was going to be able to, he wanted to do a debate on patriarchy, and I said, since we had to sort of set the wording and he agreed to it, that he could set the wording, and then we would discuss who would take what position relative to the wording that he crafted. And we never heard back from him, the skeptic feminist. But I think from my perspective, you know, if you watch like a Hitchens debate, both what people do is they lay out an argument that should, you know, it's a statement or a principle or something. And I think the problem was when I went back and watched the debate later, I noticed that when Carl was speaking, I was taking notes because I was trying to figure out what his overall argument was. And he just sort of listed things. And actually he went into this weird thing about attacking social science in his first statement that really didn't address the question. And so when something like that doesn't actually speak to the topic, you know, how are you supposed to respond to that then in your time? And then when I did try to respond to him in the second, you know, in my response time, what he had done was he had prepared talking points for each section. When I'm talking, he never takes notes. You know why? Because he wasn't listening to my argument. He already knew what he was going to say, which is why he said he was over prepared. And so I felt like I was making an argument and he was just making a series of statements, sort of like little, you know, Sargon videos in between. And that's why we couldn't have back and forth, because he wasn't actually listening to what I was saying or engaging in what I was saying. He was just kind of moving on to his next point. So that was my take on it. But of course, I watched it back like twice. And I think it was only when I watched the H Bomber guy part of it that I noticed that when Carl was speaking, I had my head down. And then when I went back, I noticed that Carl never put his head down. So I think that was a big problem in the fact that he didn't really come with a statement, a principle. Like, what was his argument at the end of the day? I couldn't sum it up. Because
that's what I mean.
In my opinion, he didn't have one.
Is you came in wanting to prove the resolution that feminism is good for the world, and I can't attest to what was in his mind, but as an observer, I felt like his proof, his resolution was that social sciences are not a real science, and therefore any conclusions they come to are invalid. Therefore, all of your sources for proving your arguments are invalid. And that's what I mean by you two were not actually discussing the same thing. So it made it very difficult to see a real interaction there.
I think that's the most coherent summary of Carl's argument I've ever heard anyone make. Honestly, I could tip my cap. And I wish he would have said that. Because then if he would have actually made that sort of coherent statement, then I could have dealt with the premise of, when we observe the world, does the object of our observation determine the validity of the method we're using? I'm perfectly happy to have that debate. But what I was sort of listening for, what I expected, because I didn't do formal debate, but I am a politician, or at least I study politics. So I wanted to figure out what the best arguments he could make against me were. And then I crafted, in part, my opening statement and in anticipation of him. What I thought he would probably do is, which is often what happens when people make sort of anti-feminist, anti-third wave feminist arguments, is I was okay with first wave feminism, that's about voting. Second wave feminism, that was okay too. Although there's a lot of problematic stuff in second wave feminism, which kind of always makes me put my eyebrow up when people say that. Then they'll say, but it's just this new third wave feminism. The world. And that would have been a really, that would have been at least a pretty powerful argument, and one that he could try to, argue from, evidence, or at least, argue from a few examples of things in real life. But that he was talking about girls with blue hair and people who are unqualified for their positions being promoted beyond their ability. And that had nothing to do with the, why feminism is good. That was a swipe at me. At least that's certainly how I kind of read it in the moment. So, yeah, I think it was an interesting experience in terms of the tactics we both brought into the debate. You can definitely say that for it.
It was interesting, and anybody, I know I'm dating myself as like a person active on YouTube, but anybody who is like watching this or is going to watch this in the future, if you haven't watched the debate in question, you should definitely look for it and look it up and watch it through yourself. And I recommend that people sit back and try to not taint it with their own biases. So sit back and evaluate the arguments, not because your team's Carl Benjamin or team Kristi Winters. Just watch it like a person watching two people discussing an idea, and you'll be able to see what's going on. So,
can I say I love the way you listen? I know this is a weird to say, but I noticed this actually in the Woolly Bumblebee Hangout, that you almost alone, maybe Christiosity is another person who is this good a listener, but you really let the other person speak at their own pace and give them enough time to finish their thoughts, I think even better than I do. And so I wanted to just say that I noticed that also from the Hangout, in addition to your audio quality, that you are a very good natural listener in these sort of Hangout situations. And it's really lovely, because I have had to do Hangouts with Tim, who constantly interrupts. I always give him a hard time because I love Tim and I tease him about this. But no, I do sincerely mean that. It's actually a skill. And I wanted to point it out so that people in the audience can actually listen to you listening.
I got a compliment from Kristi Winters. That's it. My career on YouTube is over. I'm fucked.
Yeah, that's it. They're just going to hurl SJW at you now. You're part of the Winters clique or whatever they're calling it.
Yeah. And I mean, I would love, and I don't want us to turn this Hangout into that, but I would love to discuss some things with you in the future. Like, people like are sending me DMs and tweets being like, don't talk to so-and-so, and don't talk to Kristi, and don't talk to the Woolly Bumblebee. And I'm like, why? And then they link me to things that have nothing to do with anything. And so like, I would love to like do like a clearing the air, like, people say this is the non-existent evidence. Speak your mind.
Yeah, I was really excited about actually having the chance to talk to you, because I think a lot of times, especially now with Louis Pascal and Sturkor, and now yourself, I feel like oftentimes people are reacting to the YouTube caricature of me before they react to me. And so what I'm finding is when I actually, when we sit down and that, yeah, we can have a conversation. And I've always said reasonable people can disagree. Most, I think reasonable people should disagree. I think a diversity of opinion is very healthy. Groupthink means no progress. But it has to come from a place of mutual respect. That's just the starting point, and you've shown me that. And I also have to say that because my first encounter with who you were was the VidCon situation, which we talked a little bit now, so I feel comfortable kind of just giving my thoughts on it. I initially, when I watched what was happening, at it, especially when you were talking about the harassment you were getting. I've been harassed, probably not to the same degree, because you had multiple YouTubers going after you, where I just had one big YouTuber going after me. But I immediately had empathy for somebody in your shoes. And also, it broke my heart to hear how upset you were, because I actually haven't been that upset over what happened, and mostly because I'd seen it happen to other people, and I had tried to prepare myself a little bit, and then when it did happen, I had strategies for coping with it. And we did this hangout, I went back and watched the hangout again, and what really struck me the second time was noticing how it was systematic psychological abuse, that entire, from sort of the moment you entered. And once things really just sort of summed it up for me. Andy Worski was berating you. And he said, we wanted you, if you just came on the stream and you apologized and you said what you did was creepy and stalky or whatever, but no, you had to go and defend yourself. And I just thought, those sound like the words of an abuser. Blaming you for actually wanting to offer a defense of yourself is what you were guilty of. And that has stuck with me for the last 24 hours since I finished watching that hangout. And that is why I call that, what happened to you undoubtedly was gaslighting, and literally almost like, indoctrination levels of breaking down who you are, making you doubt everything you were feeling and thinking, doubting the validity of your own experience.
And that's why I'm so glad. Oh, sorry.
The end, they were only motivated to cover their ass.
Yeah.
And I really wish I could give you a hug to make up for, like, just to say how much that breaks my heart for you. So I wanted to, I didn't know how, when I started talking about it, and I got actually quite passionate. I didn't realize how much this had actually really been bothering me for the last day on your behalf. And yeah, so since we started talking about it, yeah, I'm done now. I got that out there, and I just felt so terrible for what happened to you.
I'm very glad that you realized that, because like at the time, and again, because I'm so close to it, I haven't been able to go back. I have actually never watched the live stream start to finish. I came in when I came in. I said my piece, or attempted to. I was shouted down. I was asked to delete the recording, and I was put in a position of, do I lie and say, yes, I'll delete it? Or do I say no with the thought of like, I don't know, maybe I'll change my mind in the future? Either way, I come out lying. So I'm just like, you know what? I'm not making this decision now. You guys have a good night. Bye. So like that's what that whole thing was. But honestly, I didn't even realize that Andy was gaslighting me. I just remember him saying things to me like, do you even know who I am? And being like, dude, like, how full of yourself are you? Like, you're just a person who lives in fucking Mississauga, Ontario, in like a shithole, like super overdeveloped, like concrete jungle, who makes videos on the internet. Like, you didn't do anything amazing with your life. Like, you are nobody. You didn't write a book. You didn't invent anything. Like, do you know who the fuck I am? Like, what is that even supposed to mean? So like, I felt hurt by that statement of his, but I felt really gaslit by Bunty. First of all, before VidCon, I had no idea who this guy was. While at VidCon, I felt like he was constantly like latching on to things that were happening in order to periscope them, in order to get views. He said to me when I had asked him like, oh, what's your channel on YouTube? Like, trying to get to know this random person who's like going with the rest of us. And he said, oh, I'm a pretty big deal on Twitter. And I'm like, okay, like, I didn't know people were big deals on Twitter. That's good to know. Congratulations.
Yeah, normally people get big and then they go on Twitter. That's normally how people get big.
That's what confused me. I was like, okay. So that was like the thing that bothered me while I was on there. I'm like, I've got this rando that I never even like really knew before VidCon yelling at me, "You're a manipulator." And I'm like, dude, like, you don't even know me. Like, you've never interacted with me. Like, you talked to me maybe like 3 times at VidCon, and even then the conversation was like 3 sentences. Like, you're just sitting here for attention. You're just yelling that for attention.
It definitely started with Bunty. My recollection from watching it yesterday was he was the first one who, he said, he basically broke into the conversation, seeming to want to calm it down. And instead what he did was accuse you of being the master manipulator and it being a master class and everyone should just watch you. And immediately from there, Blair and June and Andy, they all picked up on it. And anytime you tried to express a sincere emotion or a sincere motivation of why you did something, like the fact that it was her birthday and you thought it would be nice, they would go, manipulator, thereby discrediting anything that you were trying to communicate in terms of, hey, guys, I didn't, you were trying to be apologetic. You did apologize in the stream. And they were still berating you, even afterwards. I don't know what you can do more than say, I'm sorry to somebody.
I told them, I apologized to them about the way that they felt. Like, I'm like, I'm sorry that you feel that way, because I'm not going to make an insincere apology. I don't feel like I did anything wrong. I feel like they did a lot wrong.
Yeah, and they admitted no wrongdoing.
No wrongdoing. And I understand, like, in hindsight, that I made a recording and it's against California law, but I also understand that, like, there's wiretapping laws, and then there's just like civilians doing what they want, and it's kind of like a gray area in California, so it's not really a prosecutable offense at all. But then, like, June goes and releases a video I didn't even know she had taken of me, and I'm like, guys, like, this is fucking hypocrisy. You don't get to come after me for a recording that I made because I knew nobody would believe me, and other than Jeff, nobody believed me. And when Matt Jarbo, boring Matt, heard the recording, he's like, oh, this people's behavior doesn't even surprise me. And then later he goes, I couldn't even hear anything on the recording. I'm like, okay, dude. you say what you need to say to get your views, Mr. Sir. So yeah, like, there's a lot of like groupthink that StirCore really picked up on, and he walked me through it, and I was so upset. And honestly, without StirCore, I don't know how I would have. I'm sure I would have figured it out, but he really helped me organize my thoughts on the whole thing and really brought me back from the brink of darkness in a way, or set me on a path where I could walk towards like a less foggy, horrible reality in my mind. So that was really nice of him. And he didn't owe me that.
I think it was really valuable because you were in the middle of it, so you couldn't, you didn't have an outside view to kind of check the manipulation that was being done of you, especially in that, what was it, a 4-on-1 situation, and also then perpetuated by the fandom that were echoing, just repeating all the words, the key phrases that they picked up on during the course of the bullying. And so as you were saying, it was well, getting back to, even if there was, let's say, fault on both sides, I think there was definitely the fact that how they handled it, the events inside the suite were completely unacceptable. I mean, as somebody who has been a lecturer, and I have students who want to sort of talk to me after class, or come by during the office hours and then keep kind of talking afterwards, knowing how to disengage with someone. You guys were going to see each other the next day. They could have said, thanks so much. Hey, we're going to get together for coffee in the morning. Do you want to catch up then? That would have been a much better way to handle it, right? Because there's no reason to berate you or belittle you, even if they wanted their privacy because it was like they wanted to be there 3 couples in a room. There's still a way to gracefully get out there, and especially to be gracious to somebody who's shown you such kindness. So, I definitely think even if you want to say there was fault on both sides, there was way more fault on their side in terms of how they handled it in the room. And then handling it on the stream, I think, was even worse, simply because it's kind of one thing if you've got 50 subs and you come on and you complain about people. That person might get some comments, but it's not going to be so bad. The number of fans they have between them And the way that they were inventing stories out of pure air, and making accusations without evidence.
Yeah,
Was
and
incredibly
Memory
dangerous.
Holiday made a 40-minute video or a 30-minute video about how, like, all of these horrible claims, like I was a knife-wielding violent stalker who hacked accounts and kept record of everybody's addresses and waited for hours until somebody showed up, like, at somewhere, and then waited and then followed them around VidCon. Like, she made all of these accusations, and people keep referring to her video. She's taken it down. So everybody can interpret what that means, but nobody's come to me and said, like, hey, Naomi, like, I know that I made that video and it was really shitty. Now I know better. Like, I shouldn't have jumped to the conclusions that I did, and I shouldn't have uploaded that video. Like, people keep referring to that video, like, hypothetically, and there's no way for people to view it and watch the crazy, cruel accusations.
More importantly, the responsibility to make a video saying, I put this out, I didn't have evidence, I just want to apologize. I want to say I would retract my previous statements, and I would hope anyone who has ever bothered her apologizes, and everybody else, leave her alone.
But no, there's doubling down, because I've noticed that the holidays, they're social climbers. It's all about the views. It's all about the clicks. It's all about the Patreon money. And I know that a lot of people that follow Jeff Holiday are like diehard Jeff Holiday fans. So, like, if you want to come after me, enjoy. All of my comments on YouTube are moderated, so none of them are going to get published. Eat shit. And I'm very comfortable muting people on Twitter. So enjoy your life. My internet area is going to be very nice and positive and full of good discussion. If you are angry with me and you want to have a civil discussion, I'm down for that, but don't come at me and call me names. But the holidays, like, I heard that somebody called Memory on her bullshit, and her and June, like, just dogpiled them because Memory and June are now besties.
Yeah, it's so high school. I mean,
Yeah.
really, that's the other thing that it felt like, you know, watching a clique harass the odd girl, you know, in order to elevate themselves. It was the jock and the popular girls, jocks and the popular girls, you know, pushing someone up against a locker. That's really what it felt like, a lot of that hangout, watching it back and from the outside. And I'm glad it was taken down, but in some ways, you know, I'm glad that it was mirrored, because it is a study in how you can bully somebody in a hangout. It's just astounding to me. But anyway, I don't want to just focus only on that, because lots of other things. But also, you know, if there's other things you want to say about that, you might be sick to death of talking about it.
That's the thing with me. I'm open and welcome of open conversations. I can have the same conversation open over and over again, because my goal is to perhaps be exposed to new ideas and new perspectives and a new take on things. So I'm cool with it. If you want to move on, what I wanted to definitely touch on during our stream was the nature of kind of like zingers on Twitter, especially,
right.
I guess now with the more characters, it's not so important to get the zingers in as fast as possible, but the whole zingers and the wrecked culture is destroying conversation. Like, I understand there's a time and a place for it, but also, like, I go around Twitter, like, asking honest questions, and I actually have to end the comment with, I'm honestly asking, because I don't want my question to come off as, like, I'm trying to get you. Gotcha question.
I think Twitter is probably the worst place for conversations. I think the best kind of original tweets that can maybe be made on Twitter, I like Tom Bloke is quite witty and parodying things and short-term reactions, but at least for me, it's hard. You've got the longer characters now, but on the other hand, I'm also finding that if I see just a big block of text, I scroll through it. Like, you know, if someone's used all 280 in a single line, you know, like a running thing all the way down, I'm like, I like Twitter to be short and kind of quip and witty in that way. Maybe, do you have an Ask FM?
I do have an Ask FM. It's linked. If you go to www.crazyhair.com, the website, there is a link to the Ask FM there.
Do you find that's better for conversation?
Not really, because I get a lot of like, so how was Vern in bed questions. Even though both of us have like said like, yes, we shared a bed and we shared a room, but we did not have sex. Both of us are in relationships. I'm sure his girlfriend would not be happy with these accusations. And my boyfriend, I don't even talk to him about these accusations because he would probably punch a bitch in the face. And he's a big teddy bear.
Yeah, just say, he snored. There you go.
I think that every time I came back to the room, he was already asleep, or I was already asleep when he came back to the room. So I honestly couldn't tell you if he snored or not. I don't remember. Not an important piece of information to remember.
Yeah. Well, it's just more of a deflection, or yes. Because I had some hangouts recently with friends who are into comedy, and we talked about the comedian Stuart Lee. What he does when people try to heckle him is he just asks the question like as if they were being sincere.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you want to know if he slept with his arm above his head? Kind of, yeah. And then just kind of keep asking them as if you don't understand, and then eventually they'll lose interest. But I don't know if you have time for that. It's also like a lot of time out of your day for somebody who's just trying to troll you.
It's a good strategy for sure. But on my Ask FM, I basically only answer like the silly or the conversation inducing questions. So that helps.
What can you give me an example of a good conversation you've had or a good interaction you've had on Twitter as sort of like a gold standard of what you are looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. Even semi-bad interaction on Twitter. So I would see a tweet that would say something like, if you don't use my pronouns, like you're a piece of shit. And I would ask a question like, what if somebody asked you what your pronouns were before having a conversation? Like, don't you feel like that would kind of intimidate them from just conversing with whoever? And then that person would call me a TERF, of course. And another person in the comments would say something like, don't you understand the plight of trans people? And I would say, like, honestly, I'm asking because the majority of the world is not on Twitter and Tumblr. They're not privy to this. So can you explain like why you feel like asking pronouns or being corrected on pronouns like invalidates you as a person, as they say? And a lot of people would tell me to go Google it, and I would come back with a main page of Google with like, this is a biased source, this article doesn't discuss that at all, like, can you give me more of a direction towards what you're talking about? And sometimes it ends with somebody giving me an actual source to something. Most of the time it ends with a blocked and fuck you, but I try.
Do you do interviews on your channel? Like, have you thought about doing podcasting where you get people on and just ask them questions and listen to what they have to say? And because you seem like it would be a natural thing for you to do.
I've tried doing that, but honestly, I've been deplatformed and blacklisted so much that the majority of people that I've invited on have either never responded or said they're coming and then they don't show up.
Oh, well, I guess, you've now appeared on Wooly channel and mine. So maybe through our networks, you can know, or maybe just like with people on Twitter saying like Vadim or someone really like cool. That. Yeah, just keep asking. I bet if you kind of cast a wider net, or if someone says something on Twitter, say, well, would you want to come on my show and talk about this? Before you ask anything else, before you get into the conversation, they say that, and you go, this is an interesting thing you've just said. Would you want to come on my show and talk about it?
I've actually, when I've said that to a couple people that are not familiar with the whole Twitter and live streaming thing, they get very intimidated by that. And I say, like, don't worry about it. It's like having a phone conversation with a stranger. Like, you just start by talking about who you are, introducing yourself, and then you talk about your ideas. But a lot of people that are just into like Twitter snarkiness and the Twitterverse and the Tumblr like posts, they're not very comfortable with that whole like hop on a stream thing. But I have offered that in the past, and I will continue to offer it to people that I'm super interested in learning about their experiences. So yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, I was thinking someone like Lonely Wolf is someone you might want to chat with. He's a men's issues advocate, but not sort of part of the men's rights activist sort of Paul Elam side of things. And he's a really cool dude, and I think you guys might have an interesting conversation. So again, I can put you in touch if you'd like.
That would be great. The men's rights movement is something that I'm definitely very interested in. I had a great lunch with some of the members of the Honey Badger Radio, and they're very, very how do I say this? They're very passionate about the things that they stand for. There's very little room for wiggling. It's kind of like a hard stop of where that conversation and issues can really go, because I understand through all their reading and experiences, they've made up their mind about the goals that they have. But they were a very interesting conversation. I had dinner with them in Sargon, and I think Dr. I don't remember the rest of his thing. He was there, and Vernaculus was there. We were at some swanky food place. So that was the first day of VidCon, and then I had lunch with them, I think, the second day of VidCon. So they were a really interesting group.
The only doctor I know is Dr. Lehman.
Rander McCam. That's it, Dr. Rander McCam.
Okay. Yeah, don't know him. Or her. Don't know who that is. But, yeah, well, the Lonely Wolf is more like he was. I don't know if you remember Captain McCool, but he was also someone who like cared deeply about men's issues on a lot of different topics, but didn't really feel comfortable in the men's rights movement, and sort of negotiated, like talked to feminists, but didn't identify as a feminist, and and also Lonely Wolf sort of occupies that same space. So he's probably more moderate and less hard on the issues, and so it might be interesting for you to talk to him about where those differences might lie.
Mm-hmm. I try to also engage with people that are pretty contentious and say things that really cause my blood to boil. And my blood boiling is pretty much me sitting here seething, being like, that is not cool. That is my blood boiling. And so
what are some examples of that? Like when is your blood boiled?
Lately, Braving Ruin. I have challenged him 3 times to like come on and talk to me. His channel, my channel, private, public hangout, don't care. But I'd love to talk to him about his ideas about the Jewish question and about centrism not existing. And I've actually that's the hangout that you saw with Sturkor and I, the centrism, what is it? Where he's like, there is no such thing, and I'm like, yes, there is.
Yeah.
So I've asked him twice on those 2 topics, and then a third time when he brought it up again, and like silence. He was there after the whole VidCon debacle. He was in my DMs being like interested in the recording that I had and the way that they were acting, but then he kind of disappeared, and I'm like, dude, like I challenged thee smack with glove to a discussion and nothing. But that would be interesting.
Right. Yeah, I would say so. So yeah, so anything Zingers. Sorry, we got off the topic of Zingers. So
yes.
Right. In the what I was saying was, is quite quippy. It is the sort of getting in a dig or throwing in something and then dropping a GIF on it. And that kind of prevents the better conversations that you've had.
Yeah, it's very common for me to see it, and I get very disappointed by it. And I see it a lot from people that I'm pretty close with. Like Sturkor is a shitster. He knows it. He like just goes online and makes a comment that he knows is gonna piss the people off that he knows he's gonna piss off. And Vernier Viral Roy is asking if I still have the recording, and yes, I do still have the recording. I'm willing to discuss deleting it if they openly retract all of the false accusations they have no basis or no proof for, but they'll never do it. So moving back onto the Twitter thing, stupid chat distracted me.
Yeah, that's okay.
is like, I feel like people go on, like Sturkor, for example, will go on Twitter and be like, he'll post a screenshot of something that somebody who supports Sargon said, and he'll say like, just another brainwashed idiot or something like that. And I'm like, dude, don't, like, it would be so much better if you published that screenshot and linked to like a source that debunked that and said something like, it would be a lot more productive to examine idea X linked here than to say this by Sargon. And that actually induces conversation instead of just like, this person's an idiot, I hereby put myself in this camp.
Right. So I remember I was going to ask you a question before, and then I forgot it. And then I said what I said the last time, and I remembered what it was now, which is, what is centrism to you, and why is it the position that you've taken up?
Centrism, I never called it centrism. Other people have given me that label.
Oh, okay. I thought you said you were a centrist in the Hangout, but I might have been misremembering. So please correct me in tell me what you do.
It's a label that people have put on the ideas that I hold. So in order to make it familiar to people I'm interacting with, I don't mind owning the label centrist. But centrism basically means that each idea is evaluated without connection to partisanship. So I don't look at an issue, let's say abortion, and then consult my liberal handbook to see what I think about it, and then take that position. I look at an idea such as abortion. I listen to people such as Steven Crowder and what's her name? Sincera Taylor, like two extremes, and I listen to people discussing it and why they believe what they believe. And myself having a biology undergrad, I know what the science is, and I take all of that information and I make a decision about how I feel about abortion, which is, for me, I would never terminate a fetus, even though I'm pro-abortion, after the 24-week period, because after that, with modern technology, it's viable outside the womb. So that's my opinion. But if another person, let's say, has a child that is severely deformed and severely mentally incapable, and they find this out, or it happened due to an accident in the 3rd trimester, I will fully support that person having an abortion as well, because I believe that that child is not going to have a full, amazing life, and it's going to negatively affect that family, and it's not fair to the other children, it's not fair to the parents. And yes, we can discuss the technicality of life, but what kind of a life is it if you're stuck in a wheelchair drooling all over yourself for the rest of your life, unable to think or imagine or feel or anything? And that's centrism.
Right. Now, is there are there core principles that you think, because in the abortion case, there is the case that you can use medical technology, and those lines may blur if technology gets better, right? So we have to be flexible on those things. But in the main, you have the ability to use empirical evidence. What about an issue like marriage equality, which is more based in a value judgment? Do you feel like there are core values that underpin centrism generally, or do you think that a person has to apply, you're applying centrism based on your own core values, and what are those?
I grew up in a very liberal household. Most Jews grow up in a very liberal household. Not the Orthodox Jews. They grow up in a very conservative household. But I grew up knowing that as long as, like, I guess the easiest way to put this is your freedoms end where mine begins. So like, if your freedoms are infringing on mine, they're no longer your freedoms, because I put up the stop for that. So you're free to fart wherever you want, But if you're farting like in my personal bubble without my ability to leave, you have now infringed on my rights, and fuck you, like, get out. Like, I guess that's the easiest way to put it. So when it comes to marriage equality, for example, everybody should have the right to marry another person, another human being, whether they be like 5 people wanting to marry each other. I don't care. If they're happy, they're happy. But that freedom ends where you tell somebody else that they have to do something for you. So if you go into a church, let's say a Catholic church, and you say to them, hey, like, my gay boyfriend and I want to get married in your church. And the church is like, well, we don't support gay marriage in this church. You don't have the right to go to the government and say, make them let me get married here, because that, like, there's a bazillion other places you can get married. Go get married on the beach. Go get married in a cute little hut. Go get married anywhere. Just don't infringe on other people's freedoms to say no. And when it comes to the free market, it becomes a little grayer, because I would rather a baker be able to say, no, I'm not going to bake a cake for that gay wedding, and that the media storm create a situation by which that baker goes out of business, than I would the government saying, no, you have to bake that cake.
And to be fair, I think every marriage equality bill that's ever passed has always had a religious exemption for religious institutions. Like I think some liberal progressive sort of Anglican churches are celebrating marriage, same-sex marriage. But yeah, I mean, that's a hypothetical, but just to kind of clarify that, there's been no government bills to force the Catholic Church or a Jewish synagogue to perform a marriage ceremony. But I see also then the flip side of that, which is people who oppose marriage equality can do so privately, but they don't have the right to use the power of the state to interfere with other people's private decisions in terms of getting married.
Right.
So those are the kind of...
And it's kind of a gray area in most places, which is what I mean about centrism. So if, let's say, a super Christian group got together and they built a subdivision, a gated subdivision, where all of that land is owned by them, and they created a property management group where they decided that no gay people were allowed to live there, they should be free to do that. But then it comes the place of, like, if a property were to open up, can a gay person buy that? And that's the gray area of, like, yes, they can buy that, but also these people have the right to, in their own property of private area, to do what they want. So that's the gray area of, like, oh shit, what the fuck do we do here? And I don't have an answer for that. It's being open to the fact that this is not black and white. There's a lot of space, and we need to examine it.
Right. And so I want to say, in my opinion, and I'm not here to have a debate. I think, you made your points very well. I think on the issue of bakers or florists or others who are operating a business in the private sector, maybe this is also the fact that American law has been decided in this way, and it makes sense to me, and I don't know Canadian law. But the principle, at least in U.S. law, is that the marketplace, the market square, as it were, old-timey kind of places, is a public square. And that means all members of the public should be able to use it. So when you open your business to the public, unless it's for health or safety reasons, like somebody not wearing shoes or somebody being too drunk and they're getting violent, so you kick them out or whatever, a private sector business in the public square is meant to be accessible to the public. And so when they say we are going to refuse service to this specific group of people based on your religious beliefs or any beliefs, racial beliefs or sexist beliefs or anything else, I think then the problem becomes you are no longer providing the public service that the license to operate as a public, in the public sphere, or in the public square, as in the private sector, that you violating that agreement. And that's why you can't, I don't think you should be able to discriminate your customers based on something like a religious discrimination or a private belief, that isn't something that you would apply to fairly. I know personally that if a business opened up and it was run by a particularly fundamentalist group of, we can name quite a lot of religions, where where you're not meant to interact with women, and so they would only serve male customers, you better believe I would complain about discrimination. So I think it's just, if it was us in that situation, because we're a member of the public, would we want it? That would be my case for requiring that if a business is going to operate in the public square, then they have to actually serve members of the public, unless there's some sort of justified reason that would apply to all businesses. That's my take. So we don't have to debate that. I just want to kind of put that out there, because I wanted to move on and ask again about the sort of centrism thing. So you're on an outsider's perspective, so you don't have sort of a dog in this fight, but using a centrist lens like you have, what is your take on the constitutional right to bear arms in the United States versus attempts at gun control? What would you say in terms of, because here you've got an issue of freedom as enshrined in constitutional law, so that must carry some weight in terms of a centrist perspective, I would think.
In that case, I evaluate, this is a concept that I learned when I was fighting a traffic ticket. I lost, spoiler alert. But I argued that we need to take the law in the spirit of the law. So when it comes to the Second Amendment, the spirit of the Second Amendment that it was written in was that the people of the United States should be able to arm themselves, whether it be with stones or guns, in order to combat a possible tyrannical government. And then there's the environment in which that law was written was an environment of rebellion against a superpower. So taking those two things into account, I would completely support in the United States the rights of someone to bear arms, but the gun culture, the NRA coolness that is marketed is a little absurd, because it goes beyond the spirit of the Second Amendment. So yes, you should be allowed to own a pistol and a hunting rifle that are properly stored in a gun safe with the magazine separated from the gun itself and no bullet in the chamber. Like, that's safety and security. But for anybody to own a semi-automatic or an automatic or any kind of assault rifle that shoots more than like a magazine or 2 shots in a shotgun is absurd to me, because it's not in the spirit of the law. Now you're a militia, but you're not part of what it says in the Constitution, an organized militia. Now, if you're an organized militia, there should be some kind of registration for that. And I understand the irony of registering a militia that is supposed to protect against the government with the government. There might be like some way to do that. But if you're an organized militia, so you receive the proper certification for that kind of thing, I can understand that situation, owning a semi-automatic, because you're a defender of freedom. But anybody being able to walk into Walmart in the States and buy a semi-automatic or a 3-burst shooter, whatever gun, just because it's the Second Amendment is absurd to me. And that's my long, rambly answer. Sorry.
No, it was, I agree with a lot of what you say. First of all, I want to say up front, I come from a family that hunts. I saw pictures. My nephews were out getting their first bucks on Facebook. So that has been part of my life. And I have really no problem with rifles and hunting rifles at all. I also don't have any objections to people having, as you said, handguns in their houses that, have a normal clip, not sort of this sort of 100-bullet sort of augmentation on it. But yeah, when it comes to the issue of gun safety and gun rights, I think there's also a lot of problems with the underfunding of the databases, the underfunding of communications between various police departments in order to find track people. For instance, we just had the situation recently in the States and Texas, the largest mass shooting in Texas history, where a guy who had been convicted of in the military of a military crime because he had struck his wife and struck his infant child to the point where he actually fractured the child's skull in the brig. And when he was discharged, because the military crime wasn't registered as domestic abuse, he wasn't automatically put on the register as an abuser who should never be able to buy a gun again. These kinds of problems exist, and this is also part of the overall issue of the NRA trying to stop all of this sort of regulation, because any regulation is a threat to their sales. But on the issue of how the Second Amendment came to be, because when you started, until actually earlier this year or last year, that's what I thought too. And then I saw there was a really good historical video. I think it was done by Vox, but there was someone else maybe who did it as well. And they recounted, if you go back and actually look at the politics in colonial America when the Second Amendment was being written, it was the southern states, because what happened was the Articles of Confederacy failed, the government collapsed, and what they realized was that individual states, they couldn't each have equal power. They had to have a federal government in order to one ring to rule them all, right? And one of the consequences of that was that instead of each state having its own militia or military, that was all going to be aggregated up to be a federal armed force. And the southern states were terrified that if they weren't allowed to maintain a standing militia, they wouldn't be able to keep putting down the slave revolts. And that's why it says a well-regulated militia being necessary to whatever, the common defense or something. It was to make sure that domestic tranquility of whites was maintained, so that if the slaves got out of line, they could use their guns and kill them. So that shocked me. And it doesn't change my opinion on people having hunting rifles or anything, but it made me realize the story I had been told, dressing it all up in patriotism, when the fact is it's a direct result of wanting to maintain an oppressive economic system.
And that's fascinating. It would be really great if you could link me that thing or the title that you remember so that I can search it.
Definitely.
That would definitely be something interesting to take into the processor.
Yeah, and that's how I felt. I mean, it shook me. Like it really made me, and this is, I mean, because I'm a progressive and more on the liberal side, I'm not super attached to this vision of what America was in its heyday or anything. I think that the best days lie ahead of us, and we might not see them all. You know, my nephews and people's kids might see those days, but we're better off than we were 100 years ago, and we're way better off than we were, most of us. Right? Like some people were 100 years ago, things were still pretty shit. But the things are getting better, right? And so my focus is on the future, not putting the past, especially the American past, in a box where we can't criticize it. Thomas Jefferson had a long-going interaction with a woman who was his slave. She was his property. She had no options. It was rape. He also wrote the documents that inspire our country. He's like, I don't want to make this direct comparison, but with the whole Me Too campaign and all of these really horrible things being revealed about men in society right now, the most recent revelation about Louis C.K., I was a big Louis C.K. fan. I don't really, I mean, I'm trying to remember back. I think I remember seeing bits and pieces about complaints being made. And now I look back and I feel really awful at myself for not more at face value. But in this environment, he was accused. He actually wrote a statement that came out today admitting what he did and taking ownership of it. You can go and read it and react to it however you want. And I'm so disappointed. It doesn't change the fact that I think he has made great comedy. I won't be able to look at that great comedy not seeing that part of him anymore. And that's how I feel about Thomas Jefferson. And you know what? That humans fuck up. We are messed up. We're not perfect. And if we get comfortable with the fact that our heroes will let us down, then maybe we'll be a bit more take a bit more ownership about, you know, who we are ourselves.
Kristi,
Anyway, sorry, that was
I'm
random.
gonna just no, it's good. I'm gonna be right back. I actually want to talk about our own founding father when I come back. I have to go. I know it's gonna sound silly. I have to patriarchy. I'm gonna go tie my boyfriend's tie because he has to go to a wake.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, but that's
Oh no,
very
it's
sweet.
okay. She was very, very old and lived a beautiful, wonderful life and made amazing jam that changed a million people's minds about rhubarb. But I'll be right back.
All right. Well, hey guys, since it's just you and me now, I'll do a little ramble. So I don't know if you've noticed, but I haven't done a lot of pre-prepared content. Actually, I'm kind of glad that we have this chance to talk, just you and me, because it's been on my mind lately that my channel is so random and very much reflects wherever I just happen to be in my life. And I appreciate your patience through all of my many iterations and phases. And I've thought long and hard about if there's any way I can get into a routine, and just the way that my life goes, I don't think that's possible. I just think random stuff is what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to embrace it now and stop trying to judge myself too much for not being more like Steve Shives and putting stuff out on a regular basis and keeping series going. But really what I'm finding, for instance, there's a lot of writing I've been doing in my work right now. And as a consequence of that, I find I don't have the energy to write scripts. So instead, I've been doing a lot of hangouts, which I think have been pretty interesting and you guys have been enjoying. And it's been a lot of fun to do that. However, I do want to get back to more of the pre-prepared stuff and the Historical Jesus series. It's just, for me, the challenge is finding that mental space. And right now, my writing schedule is super intense. I'm writing pretty much 3 to 4 days a week and then doing admin around my writing. So we'll see where things are going, but we'll continue to put out content because I just can't not put out content. The other thing that I should say is we're going to be taking a road trip. So I've got some travels to do. And I thought, sorry, now that I'm talking so much, I get a frog in my throat. I thought I would test out my phone camera a little bit more. I really like the picture on it. I think the sound quality is quite good. And a friend was going on a road trip to the western part of France and asked if I wanted to come along and maybe stop at Calais and Dunkirk along the way. And it's like, who would ever say no to that? And because I haven't done so much face-to-face stuff, I've done a lot of my avatar kind of audio things with you guys. I thought that it would be a nice change if I did maybe like a 5-minute video, kind of a hot take week, and do stuff where I would talk about some topics of the day or whatever happened to be on my mind. And then on a little bit of on the side, I would do some recording of the places that we visit and put together little video postcards on those topics. By the way, I can see that I can see you guys in the chat. So if there is anything that you want to say, you can, until Naomi gets back, you can go ahead and make some comments. But yes, so I've got this new grip kind of like stand thing for my phone. I bought it actually like 2 weeks ago, and I've been meaning to use it. All I've been using it for right now is watching YouTube videos, which sucks. But what I want to do is sort of get the stand, set it up while we're on the road, maybe over coffee or whatever, give you a little bit of take, and then upload it. And we'll see how that goes and see how long that lasts, because you know me, I can't do anything consistently for long.
Okay, I'm
well,
back.
Hey, welcome back. I actually managed to natter the whole time you were away, so that was fantastic.
That's okay. Sorry, we have a very traditional relationship in that way, that I cook and clean and tie ties, and he's my big burly man.
Well, I think what studies have found is that if people are happy in the roles that they've picked, you know, like whoever takes out the garbage, if people are both, you know, like, I don't mind doing it, and the other person's like, I'm really happy you're willing to do it because I don't want to, that balance is sort of, you know, more important. And I think also I know I was socialized. Certainly my mom sent my brother out to mow the lawn, and I was meant to unstack the dishwasher and put all the dishes away. You know, so even the things that I am good at or like I have a lot of practice in tend to be in the more traditional roles rather than in I don't know, you know, putting a coat hanger into the wall or something, or putting together a DIY kit. Although, you know, when you live on your own, you end up like, well, I go to IKEA and I come back feeling really super like full of agency because I'm like constructing things and making objects I will use in my house for years to come. And I made it. Yeah. So that's fun too, actually, now learning more of those things.
I mean, I take out the garbage, he mows the lawn, he does all of the laundry, which is great. it's I find that like a lot of people, especially the MGTOW movement, the men going their own way, for those unfamiliar with the MGTOW movement, it's really a group of people that I find have been really burned by a woman in their life, or really burned by the fact that they lack the social skills to date. And so they've written all women off. And it's very sad because I've had a lot of really crappy relationships before I found this amazing person that gets me completely and clicks with me. And I mean, there's going to be downsides to every relationship, but there's as close to perfection as you can get, and you need to keep searching for it.
Aww.
And now he's making fun of me, and I'm all blushy and stuff. Yeah, I didn't know he was still in the house. He was like, I'm running, I'm going.
We got to hear that. That's lovely. I think also there's a problem with the fact that girls are allowed to process their emotions and things like rejection, whereas boys are taught to sort of internalize that stuff or get angry about it as ways to express it. And so if they do feel a rejection or there's a betrayal, there's not a lot of practice in doing that kind of thing, like detaching, realizing that this is just one person, because especially if it's it's early on in their life and it's one of the first major relationships they had and it really, really guts them. And we've all been there, and, I was, lucky I worked my way out of it. Most people do. But I think men certainly are at a much advantage to have that problem, I think, because of the norms that society often puts forward as how men should handle themselves and handle things.
Yeah.
It's getting better. It's getting a lot better.
I was definitely surprised in high school when I found out that, I mean, us girls, we talk about our first kiss and how slimy tongues felt in our mouths and like how like awkward being groped for the first time was, and how like he like I remember being groped and like he was like massaging my breast as if it was like a stress ball, and I'm like, dude, like that doesn't feel good. I don't know what it's supposed to feel like, but it's not supposed to feel like that. And us like girls, like we talk about everything so freely and openly, and I found out that like dudes don't talk about anything at all.
I haven't. Oh, sorry. You finish. I cut you off.
Oh no. I just wanted to say that they'll be like, oh yeah, I hooked up with her, or yeah, we fooled around, but that'll be the end of it. Like there's no detail, no discussion.
I haven't seen it, or I've seen it and I've forgotten it. Maybe I did watch it. The Mask We Live In, a documentary that was made by the same woman who did Misrepresentation, about sort of norms for girls and women in the media. And this one talked more about just generally norms for boys and men in culture, and especially in the media. One of the things that one of the mentors, a guy who way to mentor young men, said is that, when they talk to the boys about, and they were like maybe in their 14 to 16 sort of age range. So, when things are good, then your friends are there with you. But when things go bad, they kind of drift away. Like they're not there to talk to you about that kind of stuff. Exactly like you were saying that, and even in the media, I think now more and more you're seeing role models of men who are emotionally having a conversation and working their way through it. But you go back to John Wayne and Clint Eastwood, those guys weren't talking about their feelings, and that's the generation, probably more my generation than your generation, and certainly hopefully boys coming up now. But I would hope that problem of men feeling, or boys feeling, younger boys feeling, or teenage boys have to reject all women as those role models become more and more out there.
Don't worry about me. I'm still here. I'm just retying this thing because it messed up.
No problem.
He's like, I better not be on camera. But yeah, I totally understand that. I mean, I wish this one would hop in with me. He never wants to be on the internet with me, even though he's constantly streaming with his Smite friends, as video game buddies. But yeah, it's. I remember talking to guys in high school and them asking me questions about like, oh, how should I talk to this girl? How should I get her to go out with me? How do you kiss a girl? Like asking for my advice when I became really close friends with them. But they would never like talk to their other guy friends that have had those kinds of experiences.
I studied psychology. Well, I took a couple of psychology courses while I was at university, and there are studies that if in terms of friendships, and actually this might have been research from my PhD, I can't remember where I learned this now, but it maps onto the same thing, which is if you ask women to rate their relationships in terms of intimacy, women rate intimacy like, who do I talk to about the things, my deepest, darkest secrets, who can I really open up to and be myself with? Women rated other women as their friends as being higher intimacy and lower intimacy with men. But when you asked men, they would rate their relationships with their female friends as having more intimacy than the relationships with their male friends. So both, so that was both men and women have more intimate relationships with if that person is a woman. And I think that's, if we change that, you'll see a lot of social ills also easing, if not drifting into sort of obscurity.
And this is where I find that the majority of disagreements that I have with the social justice group, and I say that in quotations because I feel like it's been an umbrella term applied to pretty much anybody that X disagrees with as a social justice. And I don't mean the pejorative, I mean just like the definition of, is that I feel like that whole thing is biological determinism, and that it won't change, that we can open up the discussion and make it safe for men to discuss these things, but I don't think that there will be a natural movement towards being more open. I feel like it's so deeply wired in their mind biologically that it's not going to change.
Which parts would you say are attributed to biology?
Definitely the closed, protected silence of placing behaviors that are displayed to the public outwardly without creating an image of vulnerability, which would then place you lower on the totem pole. Like that collective group, the in-group, out-group, and who rules the group and what's the dynamic of the men in the group is all biologically determined. So that's where I don't have hope that it's going to change, but I'm very open to talking to people when they're young about these things so that they can say, just like how when we were kids and somebody would steal our toy, we would want to scratch them, like, because we would be mad. And now we've learned that that impulse of anger and rage is negative. So we take a moment, we take a walk, we learn how to control it. So yes, we can learn how to control it, but that knee-jerk reaction is always going to be there because we are animals.
Well, one of the things that basically the core of my doctoral thesis was testing the extent to which psychological measures of masculine and feminine traits were better predictors of political outcomes than the reported biological sex of the respondent. And one of the things, so what they did was in the 1970s, psychologists wanted to kind of get it. There's this idea initially that there was masculine and feminine, and that was it. And they were both like boxes, right? And you sort of had masculine appearance and masculine traits and also and being heterosexual. And that was all kind of bound up in masculinity and the inverse for the sort of ideal for the feminine. But in the 1970s, that thinking was overturned by psychologists who considered gender more of a spectrum on which people could vary. But they wanted to test this empirically. So what they did was, and it's a limited sample, but the measures themselves have been tested and been consistent in what they've measured since the 1970s. They asked American undergraduates to write down the traits that they associated with the ideal man and the ideal woman. Now, there were actually two. There's also the BEM sex role inventory that was taking place around the same time and has very similar measures, but I know this particular instrument, the personal attributes questionnaire, better, so that's the one I'm going to talk about. They collected the answers, and then they found sort of the most common themes. Questions for the masculine people, or for the masculine measures, were from not at all to very. How independent would you say you are? How competitive would you say you are? And there were, I think, about 8 questions for the masculine. There were then things on that were measured as feminine, which was measures and questions or statements about how kind you are to others and how important it is to help others. And these more sort of nurturing things that were associated with the ideal woman. And they took these answers and they found the most popular ones, and they put them into this 24 question. And then they administered it to a different group of students. And what they found, and what other people have found, and the measures have been a little bit refined since then through better statistical methods, but that men in the aggregate will score higher average on masculine measures and lower on feminine measures. Women will score higher on feminine measures and lower on masculine measures. However, it's not a polar thing. You have some women who will score higher on measures of masculinity, as they called it, than some men would. And some men would score higher on traditionally these feminine measures, than women would. And so what they did was they created a sort of a bivariate table where you had the concept of masculine, which was high masculine scores, but very low feminine scores. Feminine, high feminine, low masculine. Then androgynous, where you have high on both masculine and feminine measures. And then this horrible term they use is undifferentiated, where you score below the mean of the group on both masculine and feminine measures. So working with this data in my thesis, so we leave the story of the PAQ there. But when I applied it to sample of British residents of somewhere over 2,500 respondents that was weighted to be nationally representative, I could see that there were cohort effects, that the younger men had the highest scores on sort of masculinity and lower on traditionally femininity. I ended up calling them agency and communion because they're not as loaded as the terms masculine and feminine. But their sense of agency went down, and their self-reported communion went up. And some women started off with lower agency, but ended up, it got larger over time, so that the oldest women are the most competitive and the most independent. The other thing that was interesting were their occupational differences. You would think that maybe the people who are doctors and lawyers, or at least I did, doctors and lawyers and professors and the sort of high tier of society would really be high on masculine measures, but they were outperformed by people who are managers. So if you have to run a business, whether you're a man or a woman, you're more likely to report your own sense of agency and power than somebody who is an attorney. And so I see there's a lot of room for change based on society, based on employment, based on life cycle effects that mean that men are destined to always be the strong and silent type. I think people's experiences over time change them, and that one of the jobs of psychology is to optimal conditions for young people to thrive without mental suffering or trauma or other things that might set them back in their potential for years. So it's just a difference of opinion, and maybe it's because I'm a progressive, but I think by changing the society we grow up in, I think we can we can see a real result in people's lives. And I think on this issue of men feeling more comfortable in discussing their feelings and society being more accepting of that and not using it as a way to judge a man, but seeing it as part of being a man, and I think we'll have a better society.
And I can agree with you on some of those things. I'm not going to delve into that, or this is going to get like gonna be an hour stream.
I think point counterpoint is really good, because I think you make really good points, and I hope I give you enough space to make all the points you want to make. And I'm happy to not like debate it. I'm happy to just compare and move on.
That's no worries. What I would really like is for us to create, and then I feel like it's gone too far. It would be nice to create an environment in which people feel more comfortable to be themselves and feel less judged. The thing is that it's part of human nature to feel judged and be judgmental. It's like a hardwired part of us. So it's something that we need to teach. It's a skill we need to teach, just like how
Yes.
controlling your anger, not being violent, eating slowly until you're full, like things that
Yes.
you need to learn to do when you're younger. And in the same way, we need to teach people that it's better to just wait and hold your judgment before setting it in stone completely. So when Target announced that they were going to eliminate their children's sex differentiated children's toy aisles, I was happy with that. I'm like, you know what? That's great. Now a kid, no matter what age, can walk down the aisle and select a toy that they're interested in playing with. And if it's age appropriate, the parent will buy it for them or not. It's the reason that I absolutely dislike Toys R Us, because you walk in and there's the girl side, there's the boy side. It's pink and girls and dolls and hair and makeup and bracelets, and it's video games and nature and science and dinosaurs. And I'm like, why? Why? Because if you have 3 daughters, you're only going to one side of the store. Your kids are never realizing that there's another side of the store. If you have a boy and a girl, then yeah, you end up on both sides of the store, but that's just not fair. Like, what if you have an incredibly artistic male child who is all about creating beautiful canvases with finger paints at the age of 2? They'll never find that out if you're constantly just giving them dinosaurs and building blocks. Like, that's just not going to happen. So I get the whole like creating the atmosphere, but I feel like it's overcorrected because now you have parents encouraging transition of children that are so young. And I don't mean to poke a bear with the topic of trans, but I'm just using it as an illustration. Getting kids to have these ideas at such a young age is just, it's too far. Like, don't desexualize your child. Give your child the opportunity to examine themselves. Don't superimpose something on them.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're referring to that one couple who sort of put their stuff up on YouTube and brought attention to themselves. I actually have a weirdly like personal experience with this. I have a friend who has a son and about 4 years of age. Well, and she's very much like not into strict gender roles. She's not, you know, like if one of them saw some pink sparkly shoes that light up and thought they were the bee's knees and wanted them, she would buy them. Like, because they're pink, I'm not going to let, you know, I'm not going to say, no, you can't wear those shoes that you love because they're pink. You know, so she was just like, whatever makes them happy, that makes me happy. And her younger one decided that his name was Eve and wanted to wear dresses and would come home from school and change into a dress and go and play in the yard. And that's where he is now. And like, that's really cool that, you know, I thought it was like really cool. It was, they were okay with it. And then his dad pointed out, I was like, well, yes, he also sometimes thinks he's a dog. So we shouldn't, you know, we were trying to not read too much into this. But I think what I admired about that was they didn't take it in either extreme. They didn't like, oh, we've got a transgender child. They're like, oh, you know, our kid wants to wear his blue dress today, you know, and it's Eve. So, you know, now Eve, we have to talk to her. And it's not like they, you know, and they're just, he's being himself and exploring things as a child, and they're giving him the freedom to do that. And also realizing, you know, like he was just obsessed with a TV show 6 months ago, and now he doesn't watch it anymore. You know, it's like a thing, it's a phase. And for them, if he keeps going in this direction, they're completely cool with it. But if he ends up deciding he's not a dog and he's not Eve, then they're going to be cool with that too. So I think there's the other thing too is the child in one way, but also, which I think is more common, if kids do start to have questions or want to explore the things, the adults in their lives coming down hard on them and reinforcing those really strict gender binaries, you know. So that's why I kind of really admire them for just being chill about it and realizing kids change as they grow, and that he'll figure out who he is, and if he decides she's a she, well, that's their kid, you know. So
yeah. That's great. It's my parents, as liberal as they are, they're a product of their times. So when my sister came out to my mom when she was a young teenager, my mom said, "Oh, it's just a phase." And then when my sister came out to my mom again, as like an older teenager, my mom said, oh my God, you're not going to believe this. She said, wait until you have a dick in you to decide. And
what?
yeah,
What?
yeah,
Wow.
that's my mother. She is a child that grew up in a very religious house, though. So she's a first generation liberal. So that was very ridiculous. And I was there.
It sounds like it was hard for your sister, but it sounds like it was hard for her, and her reaction was, I think, ill thought through, but also I think maybe a reflection of what she was struggling because of her upbringing was probably, getting over that hump. Yeah.
Definitely. And the thing is that my mom said to my sister, she said, don't tell your dad, it'll really stress him out. So my sister didn't come out to my dad for a really long time. And then eventually when she did, my sister and I don't get along. But at the time, I took it upon myself to converse with my father when he was like, no, it's just a phase, you'll grow out of it. Like, don't worry about it. And I'm like, dude, like that is a completely inappropriate reaction. Like if my sister tells you that she is a lesbian, you say, yes, dear, and you move on because there's nothing wrong with that. Like there is artificial insemination. You're still going to have your grandkids if she wants kids. Like chill your tits. There's nothing wrong with being a lesbian. And it's like, it blew my mind that I had to sit my parents down as if they were children and be like, no, no, no.
I don't know how old your parents are. They're probably closer to age to me than I am to you.
No, I'm turning 30 this year, and they're in their 60s, approaching 70.
All right, no. Then if they're approaching 70, definitely not. You seem like you give the appearance of not being near 30 in a complimentary way, not like So, if you remember Three's Company, where the whole joke was that the landlord thought that his tenant was gay and he was the butt of every joke, and Eddie Murphy's Raw, where he does this whole homophobic thing pretending to be a police siren in San Francisco. And actually Screen Junkies did a review of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, and there are cases when they'll hug each other and then they'll go gay or worse. And they went, the voiceover came and went, we kind of forgot about that. Ooh. And being gay was definitely still, like I remember in the 90s when things started to change, it was probably the first like political awakening where I realized the extent to which my upbringing had given me one point of view, but I had a different set of values and I needed to decide which side I was on. Was I going to go with what I'd been brought up with, or was I going to join my friends and become progressive and, support LGBT rights? And that's the direction I went in. And so, and I think for some people, it's great that it doesn't seem like a big deal anymore. That for me is progress, because for you, it isn't a big deal.
That's how it is. It's really no big deal. Like I have there's some guy in my party, those of you who are watching who play video games, it's not like a place where you go with solo cups. It's like a group of people that play a cooperative video game together. So there's this guy in my party on the regular who's in a polyamorous relationship. Like he's married to his wife. His wife had a girlfriend that she introduced to her husband, who then decided to become part of their relationship. And that girlfriend then got a boyfriend who was later introduced to the other two. And it naturally became a 4-person relationship, even though in the beginning, it was only the wife that was with the girlfriend. It was only the wife that was in with the girlfriend and the boyfriend. And then slowly it kind of merged into a collective type thing. All 4 of them lived together. And I think that's wonderful if that's your cup of tea, and there's nothing wrong with it. So when he told it to me, it was almost a confession. And I'm like, dude, it doesn't fucking matter. Like, that's great. You've got 4 people cleaning one house. That's great.
I love that take. That's very good. I should also just, sorry to interrupt, but the Distributist is in the chat, and he wrote, you should talk about our debate. I will say I had a very pleasant debate with the Distributist. It was courteous. We disagreed. I think ultimately it came down to differences of values, so it wasn't like I've been told I lost the debate. I think in this case, it was two people who could reasonably disagree coming from a different perspective. But there you go, distributist. I talked about our debate. It was a very nice time, and I would, if anyone else would like to debate him, I can certainly vouch for him as being courteous and thorough, and certainly a worthy opponent in the debating ring. On that.
I feel like making like da 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 da. Sorry, I'm such a fucking nerd. I've gotten used to it. Like, it's no longer an issue. It's like, yeah, this is just the way my brain works. Wonderful.
CinemaSins is in my brain now. There's like definitely I can see parts of culture, how it sort of informs the way that we connect bits of culture. And there's actually a term for that in discourse analysis. It's called intertextuality. It's when it's sort of it's making a reference to something in order to call it back, and then people who know that reference will find the meaning in it because they have the familiarity. And there's also a channel I found on YouTube that I sort of binged on and then I didn't go back to, called Everything's a Remix. How everything is a remix. Everything is just reworking of something that already existed. And he does this sort of systematic approach to it, and you're like, damn, everything is a remix. There's nothing new in the world, it's just a remix. And maybe it's just the illusion of the videos being so good I become convinced without questioning. But I remember it being a damn good argument. All right, I'm on the rambly side now. I also think we've been going for ages, which I don't mind.
It doesn't feel like really that long at all, right?
I think it's been in like an hour and 40 some minutes. So, but that's actually not so long. But yeah, I'm having a really good time chatting. I don't know if there's other topics that you wanted to bring up too, or take a tangent. But I'm happy to chill and chat some more if you are. Unless you have to get going.
Absolutely.
I just want to check in.
Nope, the only thing I had to do today was tie that tie. And he was so funny when I got up the first time. I know he's gone now, and he doesn't watch my YouTube because he says it's cringy, which is great. Because if you read
in 3D, so 2D is always going to seem weird.
Exactly. Also, sometimes when he goes on Twitter to check up on what people are like saying / interacting with me on, he gets angry and like wants to say something, but it's great. He doesn't have a Twitter account, so he can't. So I got up to tie his tie, and he's like, I came home 40 minutes ago, and I've been watching videos on YouTube, and I can't do it. So it was really cute.
That is really cute, and good for trying first and failing, and then going in. That's good. I admire that spirit of no. I'm gonna try it first and not be able to do it, and then I'll ask for help. Thank you very much.
Yeah, he's a good guy. I don't understand how. I really don't understand how he was missed until I found him. It's like the whole nice guys finish last thing. It's a lot of women, and you know what? Coach Red Pill might be an asshole about some things, but he definitely has some things right. I don't know if you're familiar with Coach Red Pill, but he's one of those men's rights movement, how to get a girlfriend, how to act in order to get a woman to like you type guys.
Yeah, I know that Kevin Ilgen actually he has a series called The Descent of Manosphere, when he watches people's videos and basically does sort of like an analysis of their content and their takes from a critical point of view. Not like a critical theory point of view. He's just laying into them. So, and then they had a hangout together, and that was a bit of a shit show. If you like drama and cringe, you should definitely check that out. But yeah, so I'm aware of him and through Kevin's channel, and also I think I saw a response he did to Kraut about Kraut's video, and that was actually the first time I saw a video about from him.
I saw a video by him that just like made me facepalm. It's called Why Women Are Like Dogs, where he talks about positive reinforcement behavior, which is something that is common in dog training, but he's applying it as if it's like this new amazing thing that he's discovered, where if you react negatively to some behaviors, they won't repeat, but if you act positively towards some behaviors, they will repeat. And it's like, dude, like, women are not like dogs. People are prone to what's that experiment with the dogs? The guy Pavlov. People are prone to Pavlovian conditioning. And that's it. So that's what his video is about. And I'm like, you either intentionally framed this in a controversial manner in order to sound like an asshole and get clicks, or you're unaware of Pavlovian social conditioning and you think you've invented something, which is very narcissistic of you.
One of the nice things that I had in the previous relationship was I actually made an effort because I learned, that the patterns you start at the beginning of your relationship tend to last. And so if you want to start on a good footing, behaviors early on, I made a point of noticing if he had cleaned the kitchen or taken out the garbage and say, "You took out the garbage. That's so great. Thank you," and hug him.
Yeah, we did
Because I was
that. We did that.
genuinely,
We do that
yeah,
all the time. All the
yeah.
time. It's
Because
like,
you know
thank you
what?
for emptying the dishwasher. Thank you for doing this.
Yes. Yeah. One, I'm grateful, and two, yeah, I want you to do it again. And and if I acknowledge your work and make you feel good about the fact that I appreciate it, then you won't feel resentful because I haven't noticed or I've been nagging you about it. It'll be like, I'll get a hug. And that's not like a human, like you're saying, it's a mammal thing. It's not a woman, like women are like dogs, as you point out so rightly.
Yeah,
It's a human.
if how shitty a person would I come off as if I made a video saying men are like dogs. You give them treats by having sex with them and they do what you want. And it's like, that's not how it works.
Yeah, and if that's how you think it works, you have really crappy relationships. And I would hope you would aim for better. I mean, that's really a terrible, that kind of transactional view of people does exist. Certainly there's a mentality out there in terms of getting it, but I don't personally see relationship could ever be fulfilling because I want a relationship of equals. Not necessarily that you're the same, but that you respect each other equally because you value each other so much, And that always seemed to me like a much better basis for a relationship than what do I have to do to get her to give me a BJ?
Yep. And that's the thing that I don't like. Like, I don't like how popular culture sometimes reinforces this bullshit. Like how guys are like, oh, it's my birthday. I get a blowjob for the first and last time this year. I'm like, dude, the fact that you and your wife have a transaction of a blowjob on your birthday is so fucking sick. Cause like the sexual interaction of two people is so fluid. Like people think that they have this idea in their head because they watch popular culture that sex is you start making out, you feel passionate, you start feeling each other up on the couch, the clothes come off, yeah, you do your foreplay or no foreplay, depending on how selfish you are. You put the dick in the vagina, you move it around a bunch, you both come at the same time, and it's over. And it's like, that is not what an intimate relationship is. Sometimes you are cooking dinner and he comes up and gives you a hug from behind and like he kisses you on the neck, and that is an intimate interaction. And sometimes you are trying to get his attention on the couch, so you take your pants off and you're like, hey, and that sometimes devolves into something else. Like, it's not this formulated bullshit.
I completely agree. Yeah, and I think seeing sex as interactive or as an exchange, it kind of comes back to the Harvey Weinstein issue and the whole, Roger Ailes and Bill O'Reilly, these guys who sort of see women as a means to a sexually gratifying end. Beings, and I like this. I'm struck by the story of the woman who described Harvey Weinstein getting her in a room and blocking her exit out and then dropping his pants. And she's like, I don't want to be here. And he's like, okay, just stand there and don't say anything. And got off in front of her and then just pulled his pants up. And she was like a living Playboy center for him. And I don't get that kind of inability to acknowledge the humanity in another person, especially on that intimate of a level.
In the time that he grew up, though, it must have been super conservative. And maybe now we are creating a society in which people are understanding that sex and intimacy go hand in hand, and intimacy can be more than just climaxing with another person or into another person or next to another person.
I have to say, I mean, I can see another like maybe the biggest sea change, and I don't know, I hope it's a sea change that's permanent, but the way that people have reacted to these series of sexual allegations. If Bill Clinton had been running with Jennifer Flowers coming forward, he probably would have had to pull out. But because that happened in the pre-Me Too America, like a lot of other men, like Bill O'Reilly, and we can keep naming names, but Bill Clinton is one of them, a man who got away with with allegations being made, and it gets sort of flares up in the media, and people sort of go, "Oh, that's a really bad thing," but they don't actually do anything to stop the bad thing, you know. And for the first time, and it's been a lot of corporations, to be honest, public pressure, but corporations are definitely are enacting the consequences. It's not the judicial system. It's not even really, it is society, and that society is judging them and putting pressure on it. But that pressure is manifesting as losing contracts, being taken off of the air, being sort of exiled into the sex pervert corner of the world. And I've never in my lifetime seen anything like this. To me, it's transformational in terms of the consequences that people who engage in this kind of behavior, predominantly men, but I don't want to deny that there might be women who do this too, because women are capable of anything. Men are capable of anything. Humans are capable of anything, but disproportionately men. And certainly that's where the focus is thus far. Yeah, it's a massive sea change. And it's also emotionally really wrecking, I think, too, because of just the fact that a lot of people in society are being exposed. You know, I liked Kevin Spacey's work. He's ruined for me.
I'm glad you brought up Kevin Spacey, because I did a stream with a couple YouTubers slash game streamers. It's linked on my channel, and we talked about due process, and I feel like due process is lacking in certain circumstances. So, for example, Bill Cosby, there was due process. It was proven he is a disgusting rapist. With Bill Clinton, it's never been proven, but also he was in such a position of power that we never had the opportunity to do that. So it's safe to assume that he was protected from that kind of situation. With Harvey Weinstein, we have due process because we have the literal police investigating him and getting him on a hot mic. So we have due process there. But with Kevin Spacey, and you know what, if due process happens, I will eat my words. But up until then, I feel like it's just a witch hunt, just like how Mattress Girl came out and she said, like, I was raped. And then the guy was like, I didn't rape you. And then even though it was proven, she still continues to run around doubling down on this story because it gives her fame. So I don't know what the motivations are behind accusing Kevin Spacey. Somebody, I wish I remembered, brought up this great claim, a great thing to light, saying his co-star is Princess Buttercup. She's a huge feminist activist, and for her to be on set co-starring with him and to be witness to these things and to not speak out is unimaginable. It's unimaginable for a social activist, feminist to not speak out having seen these things. So with Kevin Spacey, due process has not been complete. I am not convinced of anything. And if it does come out, then it has. But the appeal to popularity, the appeal to, but so many people have said this, is just not going to work for me.
Right. But Kevin Spacey admitted to it in his tweet. He admitted to it.
He said he didn't remember, but he apologizes if that's what happened, and that he implied that at the time he was kind of hiding that part of himself, and now he's more open about it. A lot of people focused on that part instead of focusing on the fact that he is apologizing to somebody for making them upset about something, even though he does not remember that occurring.
Yeah, because the crime could still be prosecuted, so he doesn't want to admit legal guilt, but by apologizing, he's acknowledging that something happened. Also, Mark Halpern admitted what happened. Louis C.K. just admitted what happened.
But we
so
can't
when
we can't
the guys
assume what's in the mind of Kevin Spacey, though.
Okay, well, again, I think, you know, there are legal charges being pursued, so I understand why he wouldn't do it. But there's also the case, for instance, let me put it to you in these terms. There's the case of the guy who's running for U.S. Senate in Alabama, Judge Roy Moore. There have been accusations that have been made by 5 women, I think, 4 women maybe. I think it was 5 women for Louis C.K. and 4 women for the judge. So if I get those numbers wrong, my apologies. It's a hangout. I'm doing this from memory.
That's okay.
They had it verified. You know, they talked to the Washington Post, talked to 30 people that were talked to the girls at the time. And they also, part of her story was that she met him at this particular hearing. They went back and looked at the court records to confirm the date that that hearing took place, to see if her story lined up with what the court records actually said. None of the things, in this case, he gave her alcohol when she was 14. He got her to undress. He touched her outside of her underwear and got her to touch him on the outside of his underwear. That would be a crime, but the statute of limitations has run out. In Congress have been saying, well, if the allegations are true, then he should step down.
Yeah.
The fact is that these will never go to court. So, and this is, I agree, it's not perfect, but there is a court of public opinion. When such detailed allegations come out and people say these repeated things, like the Harvey Weinstein pattern happens again and again independently, these women are all coming forward and describing in detail with, you know, verifiable information where they were. There were assistants that can vouch for the interactions being set up. How much evidence is it going to take for you to not conclude legally, because a lot of these cases will never go to court, to say Kevin Spacey is a person that you wouldn't feel safe having a young man around who is not able to consent, you know, because he was intoxicated, because you believe what the allegations made against him. You believe the people who make those allegations over him. And I think that's what it's going to come down to. And if, you know, I'm not having a debate, but I just think that if we always leave the legal standard as our truth measure, then we have a really flawed measure of determining truth, because juries they're not mathematical equations. There's a lot of problems with the jury system, especially, as you say, in the United States, where there's a lot of racial biases. If you examine the cases when the defendants are white and black and members of the jury and all this.
Right,
So,
but due process is a gold standard with me, and due process can be left up to interpretation, of course, but there needs to be some kind of an external involvement in examining the case for me to state.
But what about the cases? What about the cases that are never going to see a courtroom because the statute of limitations has expired? What happens to those people's accounts and how we should perceive the persons, the Harvey Weinsteins or the Kevin Spaceys?
I'm okay with.
It's never gonna go to court.
But with Harvey Weinstein, there was the involvement of, I think it was the New York Police Department, where they did the hot mic that was published in the New Yorker. So we do have the involvement of due process in the Harvey Weinstein case that shows beyond a reasonable doubt to us that he was creepy and disgusting and expecting things that were not normal. Pardon me.
Oh, I didn't realize you were done. Okay. Well, like I said, I didn't want to, I would rather do a point counterpoint. So I think we both made our points, and then the people in the audience can decide for themselves, or just take on both of our points and add into their own.
Dusty48 asks, why do you believe in the Cosby allegations and not for Spacey? Dusty, we are going to move on for this, but as an answer to your question, Bill Cosby had a settlement in which he paid off one of the women that came forth and accused him. And in actual recorded, what's that thing called? A deposition. In a recorded deposition, he's heard talking about giving women pills in order to get them to pass out so he can take advantage of them. So because he's confessed in a legal sense to the crime, even though there was a gag order and it was put to rest so that nobody was allowed to really touch it, I believe that those women are telling the truth, and that what they said happened.
I don't want to prolong this. I want to actually just make a point, because I found this fascinating, about the contract that Harvey Weinstein negotiated with the company when he became like its president, or renewed his contract. And part of his contract said that if he were sued, basically sexual misconduct, if, as long as he covered, the company was sued because he was its president, as long as he covered all of the costs associated with payouts and attorney's fees, that the company agreed as long as he did that, that would not be a fireable offense. But for the first offense, he would get fined like $1 million. For the second offense, 2, and all the way up, and like after it got to 5 or something, it was always a $5 million fine to the company for being sued for sexual misconduct. The company claims Harvey was cheating on his wife, whether or not you believe this, and that the reason they thought he negotiated for this was for his sort of the mistresses who were coming after him after he broke up with them. So he actually negotiated into his contract, if he was sued for sexual misconduct, that that was not a fireable offense, that the company could let him go on. And that's actually part of the grounds for why he's suing the company for firing him.
And that's disgusting, hands down.
Yeah, isn't it amazing?
That kind of a clause is disgusting. Not saying that
and
anybody
lawyers drafted that. People negotiated this in a room. Lawyers, what do you think? How could you be a lawyer for this guy? I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you, but just think about the legal process of how they actually had to set that up with the fines and all of that stuff negotiated between them. I mean, that's a culture. When you talk about I know the phrase rape culture. I don't know if you want to talk about that, but that is what people talk about.
Rape culture. We should really have a discussion that is exclusively like rape culture, where you and I can both like bring forth like 3 things that we would like to discuss, whether it be like articles or videos, and we can examine that more thoroughly, because that is definitely going to be an interesting thing to talk to you about.
It's a topic that I'm deeply familiar. I could do 3 off the top of my head, but so yeah, we should set that up and give it its own time.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely send me a link to a few things, and I'll integrate them, and we'll run it through XSplit. It'll be pretty, and I'll run them online.
Cool.
So that's something that we can set up. But as for that section of the contract, first of all, I'd like to quote Donald Trump's apprentice music here when it comes to explaining why the lawyers could bring themselves to craft that, and it's money, 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 and like, there's no other explanation as to like lawyers do a lot of shitty things for money. They're very corruptible individuals, but of course people who do evil things like this, they don't perceive themselves as doing something evil. They find a way to justify it in their mind so that they're doing something for the greater good, or they're providing a service that they are not held accountable for.
It's predators. It's a predatory behavior. I mean, I know that they can justify it to themselves, but it's clearly. I think I would actually encourage people to go read the Louis C.K. statement. I'm still in a angry place with him. I still am definitely siding with the women that came forward and described what he did, and especially having him admit it. This is not like something we have to dispute. I also think that he owned it in a way that was appropriate, as sincere, and his ending was, I think, if I can actually use these words, his ending was quite powerful. He said it better, but I'll try to rephrase it. I've spent most of my life whatever I want to a group of people. Now it's time for me to be very quiet and listen for a long time. And so I think that if you want to role model in these situations for the appropriate way to deal with this, especially if the person has done, when the person has done these things, obviously nobody who's innocent should admit to having done something they haven't done. But to own it in that way, I thought was brave and a good first step, honestly. And I do feel like that. And now we'll have to see what his next steps are. But I thought it was the step in the right direction.
And from a place of full disclosure, I have not been following the Louis C.K. thing. I have not read anything or watched anything to do with it, just because I want to wait for as long as possible for as much to come out as is possible before I sit down and watch it. So I'm not colored by the time that went by or the outrage machine. So just I know nothing about this whole situation.
Okay. Yeah, that's all right. You can do a pass. Like, I have no opinion at this time. That's a completely valid answer. I used that recently in my hangout with Alex. He's like, "What's your opinion on like fat shaming and health stuff?" And I was like, "I don't really have one." Like, and he went, "Oh, okay." Like that's it. Like, I don't have an opinion on every single subject, or at least I don't have an opinion I'd want to give in a live stream because I wouldn't want to be held to account for it if I decided when I actually looked into it, I changed my mind. You know, I'd rather speak from a position of having actually some confidence rather than making a view up on the spot, definitely.
The fat shaming came up the other day when I was looking through the giant tiger flyer. Every week we do the flyers and we put together our cooking list for the week, and then we go to Walmart and price match because it's the only place that does that, which is really sad because I don't want to support Walmart, but it's so easy to go to one place instead of 8. But I'm getting sidetracked. I was looking through the flyer, and there's this plus size model. She's like a size 10. Like I'm a size 8 or 10 depending, and she's my size, and I'm considered a chubby person, and that's okay. Like, I'm cool with that. Like, I'm a very voluptuous person. But like the fact that this is a plus size model, I'm like, dude.
Marilyn Monroe.
And then when you read the fine print, it says 1x to 3x. I'm like, bitch, put that up to 5x, then you can talk.
Yeah, I mean, I just, I think one of the most beautiful women in American culture has been Marilyn Monroe. I think she was just like, she glowed. I don't know how she managed it, or maybe it was just amazing lighting, but and she would definitely be considered plus size these days. But it's crazy the sort of standards of what's considered plus. My favorite place to get clothes is a Spanish line that's available over quite a lot of places in Europe. The thing is, though, because it's Spanish, it's designed for like sort of wafer thin 14-year-old Spanish girls, teens, and so all the sizes I take are the large. Yeah, so it is a little bit like I'm not skinny, but I would also say I'm probably like a 12 or a 14 or something. In European sizes. I don't know if Canadians are like on the American scale or if you guys use the European scale. There's differences in those. But yeah, it's just, it can be to me a bit astounding. I think it's a little bit, well, not so much in France, I don't think. But I've noticed in Germany that there's a much more sort of realistic portrayal of human beings and people and bodies here than in the States. They're also a little bit more liberal. I was walking through the main train station and they have these large screens playing news clips and picture of the day and jokes and stuff. And they were advertising a burlesque musical. And so suddenly there was this flash of a woman who just had pasties over her nipples with things that dangle down sort of in a flapper's dress. And then like a really like mini kind of skirt and her shoes. And I was like, oh, I'm in Germany. Like I can tell if I'm seeing that, boom, in the Hauptbahnhof at 5 o'clock on a Tuesday, yeah, that would definitely be beyond the watershed, I think, in most other countries.
Yeah, I find that.
Sorry,
I grew up on the Mediterranean. Like, it was totally normal. Like, my dad's really, really good friend who lives in Turkey now. Yes, she's female. Oh my God, my dad has a female platonic friend. See, it's possible. They've been friends forever. And she, like, whenever we used to go sailing on the Mediterranean, and now my dad has a boat out there. He's out there every summer. I've never really had the time to join them. But if you want to go sailing with my parents, they're pretty cool dudes. There's a lot of pot and wine on that boat, though. Heads up.
Well, I have to say that there are things on that boat that I do not object to.
Oh, no. So my dad's friend would come sailing with us. Now, my brother, I think he was, let's see, I was 13. He was 12 or 11 at the time. And my dad's friend joined us for a couple days sailing. And she just had her breasts done. Like, she just had finished recovery from an amazing boob job. And I'm not talking those plastic horrible things that you would see in, like, 90s porno. I'm talking, like, she made her, like, C-cup look gorgeous. She did not wear a shirt the whole time she was with us. And no, she did not wear a bikini or a bra either. And it was so funny because my dad did not stop making fun of my brother, because my brother would like be on deck consciously trying to not look at the boobs. And I was just like examining being them like, oh, those are pretty. Am I gonna look like that one day? And me and my mom and her talking about boobs openly. My brother's just sitting there like either trying to hide an awkward boner or just trying to ignore us. It was great. So it's a lot more open in Europe. Just like
Yes.
whatever. These are my babes. They are hanging in the wind.
There's a real nudist sort of tradition in Germany. When I was about to move here, I read an article about a nudist group that had opened up a nudist hiking camp. Obviously, you wear your shoes, but the rest of it is optional. And there are also a lot of spas here, but the spas include a bathing suit area, and then they have a sauna area a lot of times, and those are bathing suit free. Like you can have your bathrobe on and you can have a towel with you. And I went with a friend. We actually went down the road to a place that ends in Bad, which means bath in German, but I can't remember which Bad because there's a lot of Bads in Germany. And it was amazing. We were in this outdoor heated pool. We had just come out of, it was called the fire sauna, because every about 10 minutes or so, somebody would come in and throw more logs on. But when you came in, it was a sort of really dark room, basically lit by the glowing fire with benches everywhere. And you just stay in there till you can't breathe. And then you go out and you cool off in a shower, and then you jump in the heated pool. And we're just hanging out. And she said, you know, what's nice about this, because everybody was nude and everyone was just chill with it, that if you looked when people weren't looking, you're just like, there's a lot of different body types out there. And I think that's one of the greatest things about that experience is you get to see the full range, because it's not hot people who, I mean, there are some hot people who go to the spa, but it's mostly, most people aren't hot. You know, most people are not in their 20s and fit. Most people have had kids or have a paunch or had some kind of, you know, surgery, so they've got a big scar or whatever. But there's a great quality in just sort of relaxing, especially like in a mixed sex. One is there to be, it is cool, and you feel completely comfortable. And I wish more people would have that experience. I think it's very liberating and very unifying.
It is very liberating. I remember when I was 14, I joined my mom's like women only fitness club. And it was really weird for me because there was a sauna in the change room. Now, this is an all women's fitness club. Men are not allowed past the entranceway. So like men can stand in the entranceway and see like the cardio machines, but that's it. The weightlifting area is behind a corner. Everything else is like pretty much hidden from sight. I get in the shower, and as like I've been a lifeguard for like years, like almost over a decade, I'd say. And I would feel completely comfortable like walking into the change rooms, taking everything off and showering. But slowly I realized that this is a very European thing and not a very Canadian thing, that like people they'll shower with their bathing suits on, then go into the bathroom stall to take their thing off and then get dressed. I'm like, but like you're washing yourself with chlorine on yourself. And in the same way, when I was in the fitness club, I would shower, and I would walk naked with my towel in hand from the shower to the sauna. And I would lay my towel down and I would lay back, like paint me like one of your French girls style, just like tits hanging out, everything on display.
Yeah.
Just chill. And people were coming into the sauna with like their towels wrapped around them, sitting down like with their towel on them. Like, dude, like this, you're totally missing the point and the fun.
Yeah,
I was very confused.
I agree. Yes, there's a lot more of that sort of repression, that puritanical hangover from our North American histories.
Yep.
Yeah, but yeah, it's one of the things that I definitely love about living in Europe, and I rave about it a lot, because yeah, it's just a very unique. It's so different from, you can experience amazing art and music and film, but there are some things that are purely human experiences. An orgasm, You know, it's you can't, and so it has to be experienced to truly be understood, at least your own understanding of it, and then you can compare it with others if you're really interested. Like for some reason now I'm thinking about people comparing orgasms. Back to, but so and now moving, you know, smoothly onto nudity. So but being in that sort of environment, you really have to experience it to sort of get that sense of it. And I think you're right, when you have it, relaxation and sort of just, here's a space where I can just just not have to worry about this, because you know what, no one else is worrying about it, and everyone's cool. And then people come in with their towels, you know, over their bikinis, and you're like, so now I feel like the slut.
It was very, very strange. In the beginning, I said to myself, like, is there something wrong with me? Like, am I overexposing myself? But then it was very strange. I realized, like, why do I give a shit?
Yeah, and it's only because other people give a shit.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Other people, they suck.
And like the thing is that now, like, I'm a pretty open person with my body. Like when I'm like at home, I'm wearing minimal clothes unless it's fucking cold, and I'm wearing a bazillion layers. But I've been told by my partner that he's not comfortable with me because I've always wanted to go to the nudist beach here. Of course, it's a small town, so if I go to the nudist beach, everybody's going to find out about it eventually. So he's been like, no. He's put his foot down. No topless sunbathing, no nudist beach. And although I'm not happy with those rules, I understand that I'm okay with making this concession to make him happy. But it's me making that concession. That's the difference between this and an abusive relationship, where it would just be like, this is my rule.
Right.
And you can't break it. And a person being helpless to say yes or no. I'm choosing to say okay for him.
Yeah, I mean, all relationships involve compromise, and you have to kind of pick the things that are important to you, and things you're like, you know what, you're more important to me than that. Like if it's going to cause strife between us, that's not as important to me as us getting along. You know what? Like sometime we'll go on vacation, you and he can go to Reykjavik, and then everybody will be doing it, and then it'll be fine. It'll be strangers.
It still won't be fine. I had this most amazing vacation down in Honduras. There's a little island there that I got my scuba diving license in, and it was great because the resort that we were staying at, there was a bar on the water, and then you could go upstairs in the bar, and there were all these tanning beds. So us ladies that were part of that scuba diving class, we would all go upstairs and sunbathe at the same time. And so we were naked sunbathing. And these guys, these American dudes, you could always tell, they would like be like, holy shit, there's like girls naked sunbathing up there. How do we get up there to like check it out? So they would come up the stairs with their stuff and like lean over to like look at the ocean, which was away from us. And they would put their stuff down, and one of them would like subtly like lean back against the barrier and like look out into the distance, aka looking over us, over a sea of naked ladies sunbathing. And I'd be like, you're not subtle at all, buddy.
Yeah, anyway, Pornhub is how many clicks away on your mobile. Seriously, dude. Like, you don't have to go out of your way to see boobs anymore.
And also, like, what?
They're literally on your phone.
They're not hot boobs. They're like, you're literally watching people like bake in their own sweat in the sun, covered in lotion. It's not a sexy boob situation.
Yeah, you're probably gonna get comments, people in the comments going, "No, that's totally a sexy boob situation." That's my king.
I didn't feel very sexy, but that's okay.
All right, so where do we go from boobs in the sun? I don't know where we take this conversation.
I don't know. I feel like I'm imposing on your evening, but I mean, all I was planning on doing this evening, other than hanging out with you online, was maybe play a couple rounds of video games. And I don't know if you saw, but I posted a picture of our Christmas tree. I love Christmas trees because as a kid, like, we weren't allowed to have them. My dad said absolutely no to Christmas trees because we're Jewish. And he said absolutely no to Hanukkah bushes because Hanukkah bush is what like the Gentile Jews do to like do the Christmas spirit thing. So you don't get a tree. Yeah, you get a bush and you like do only Hanukkah things on it. So I have these I have these ornaments, that's what they're called, but they're the wrong color scheme than what I'm going with this year. I know it sounds gay, but I'm going with more of like a winter theme on the tree this year, so I can't go with anything that isn't blue or silver. So I got the aluminum foil, and I'm just gonna wrap them in aluminum foil instead of going out and spending $20 on a new box of ornaments. Because who knows what I'm gonna want to do next year.
I think you need to copyright that before Martha Stewart steals it.
Of course. Of course. I got messages from a whole bunch of my friends and Twitter followers when I was featured. My Instagram picture was featured in a BuzzFeed article about like repurposing t-shirts, because I took all of my high school and university like science-y t-shirts and geeky t-shirts that I just didn't wear anymore, because like I'm a grown lady now. You can't just wear t-shirts all the time. And I basically like wrapped them around these 9x5 canvases, and I put them up on the wall, took a picture of it, and BuzzFeed's like, repurposing t-shirts. I'm like, okay, good, you featured me, congratulations.
That's cool. That's really cool. Yeah. Well, I'm an atheist, but I grew up in a Roman Catholic household, and one of the things that I actually like enjoyed, part of the ritual of Christmas, was we had a nativity that we would pack away at the end of every season. So it only came out, about December time. And when I deconverted from Catholicism and from Buddhism, I still wanted something kind of like that. So I don't know if you have ever seen I think it was like the 1960s or 70s, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer sort of stop motion cartoon that gets played endlessly in the United States, at least at the holidays. It was sung by Burl Ives. He does some of the music in there. But anyway, the story is really bizarre. It's kind of loosely based on the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, but it also has a dwarf, sorry, not a dwarf, an elf that, too much Lord of the Rings, an elf that wanted to be a dentist, not make toys. And it had Yukon Cornelius, who was a prospector looking for gold and silver, and Rudolph, and he had sort of this girl love interest. Anyway, all of these characters are part of this. And I got the entire set, I think at Target, when I still lived in the United States, like 15 years ago, and I've carried it with me ever since. And every Christmas I get out all the characters from this little cartoon at Christmas, and that's my replacement atheist nativity.
Yeah, and that's the thing, like these traditions. I mean, on Hanukkah we're gonna make latkes, which is like basically shredded potato with cheese and oil, like fried. It's like you keep these little traditions because it's not about religion. It's about It's about connecting with our past. And yes, the what's that thing that people keep bringing up with the it's like the guys that rode into Jerusalem and like kicked out all the Islam from it. The Crusades. Yes. The Crusades. People bring up the Crusades like, oh, Christianity's evil. And I'm like, yes, but it also has like a lot of heritage in it. Like my partner's mom is a Catholic. He was raised Catholic. I make fun of him because we went through all of his bedroom. They have it all packed up into boxes. We went through all the boxes from his kid years. I found like 7 rosaries. I made fun of him for every single one. Like, how many rosaries do you need, dude? Like, say Hail Marys for me. It's just tradition. And I have a Christmas tree because I think it's a beautiful pagan ritual to bring something green indoors while it's cold outside to remind you that spring is coming. That's it.
Yeah, I have a lot of agreement there. I think that, it's with religions in the Middle East and the West and European history. The difficult thing, of course, is that so oftentimes it was bound up in politics and government. Religion isn't just religion. It's not just a set of beliefs. It is practices that you do point out have changed over time and have adopted non-Christian themes that people just got carried along because people liked them, to be honest. And then you've got the culture, you've got the religion, and then you've got the history. And I know for me, I think you're exactly right. I think it's especially as an atheist, our human customs and rituals and the things that tie us together and tie us to where we came from, and the things that, I think there are times of the year where, yeah, there are celebrations. These are really important, at least to me, I think, to keep up. Their value is independent of the vehicle that brought them along. You don't have to think that because you put a Christmas tree up in your house, you're saying anything about Christianity. It's a phrase we use, but the whole thing about it is it's much bigger than that. In some ways, you can take the Christianity away, and the Christmas tree can stand on its own. Celebration can
Exactly.
stand on its own.
It stood on its own before Christianity co-opted it, and it will stand alone for probably as long as the human race exists, because it's a beautiful ritual.
Yeah, and we do this, sort of in many ways. Religion has covered these seasonal celebrations up, but there is something you can. There's that change from when you start to see the autumn colors appear in the stores, and the squash and the pumpkins, and the leaves start to turn in parts of the country, other parts of your country. But growing up in Wisconsin, we had all 4 seasons, so the trees would change, and this signaled something about what was coming. And then in the darkness of winter, I love the Christmas markets here in Germany. They start around the 22nd or the 23rd of November, and the light that glows up from the markets, and when people put lights out with their holiday lights out as well, you get a different of winter. The world feels like it's asleep for much longer, and then you get the pastels of spring, and the flowers start to appear. And so, yeah, there are these things that are happening around us. We're clued into them, and they're part of us because we're a part of nature. We're humans. It's what we come from. And I think staying connected to that, it increases my personal happiness, and I think I think it increases a lot of people's personal happiness, independent of religious beliefs that might be around them.
And I mean, even like the whole present giving thing, I get it. It's a lot of people complain that it's become consumerist. On the other hand, if you're doing it right, it's a nice time to show the people who you care about that you think of them. And I'm not saying that means that you have to buy everybody that a present. I just mean it's a nice time to say, like, I came across this. I thought you would like it. Here you go. I tell Jordan all the time, don't buy me presents, because he knows, like, I got an early Christmas present this year. It's not within arm's reach, but it's that little boom thing that you can put on your DSLR camera so that you can get a wind-free
Nice.
thing. And it was like $40 on Amazon. So he ordered it, and that's it. I got it. That's no need for like all the excess presents. But what would be really cute if I took little boxes and wrapped them up really nice and put them under the tree? Not because of the tradition of giving gifts, but just because, like, it would be another cute thing. Hopefully the dogs don't think they're toys.
Yeah, I mean, it's scenic, isn't it? There's something about it that you associate. I mean, because it's so predominant in the culture that the associations with it are of the spirit of giving, right? That's what in some ways, it's the hope of what's in the box, or the excitement for the look on their face when they see what's in the box. That's what the Christmas, with the presents under the tree, to really mean. I mean, I think that's their real spirit. It's not when they've all been opened and all the wrapping's been chucked away and you've played the new video game and then it's time to go to bed and it's all over. That's kind of like a letdown. It was that, dreaming of what could be, or just looking at it and seeing the lights twinkle, off of the silver or the ribbons on the presents. It's just so cozy.
And I'm an asshole. I leave the tree up until the snow melts. I like stand by that. I'm like, fuck taking it down like 2 days after Christmas. No, the purpose of this tree is to bring light, and it will bring light until I am done needing it.
In Germany, there's a tradition on May Day that still gets carried on. So if you wake up on the morning of the 1st, the tradition is that historically, a young man is besotted with a young woman, he can demonstrate this to her by taking a branch off of a tree, and not just a small branch. Talking about a big-ass branch. Like, I watched 2 guys carry a branch to tie it up. Big-ass branch.
Oh my God.
You decorate it with multicolored ribbons. And you just cover it with ribbons, and you tie it like on the pole or somewhere near her front door. And she has until the end of the month to figure out which man left her that tree, and they just leave them there. Like there's still like some raggedy ass ribbons hanging off a dead piece of wood because they don't come and take them down. So at least you take your tree out and you have it recycled. So you got that going. But yeah, that's a little kind of thing that just when I first learned of it in Germany, I thought it was really sweet.
That is so cute. People would be very confused by that here, but that sounds so cute.
You walk down the street and you see these sort of, ribbons dangling off a tree and you know somebody's in love. It's really nice.
I just thought of this because they used to do this a lot. I went to school in one of those university towns. It's St. Catharines, Ontario, near Niagara Falls. And the hippies or hipsters, whatever you want to call them there, they would do these things where they would knit onto, like it was like knitting art. I don't know if you've ever seen it. So they would measure the circumference of like poles and trees and branches, and then they would go home and they would knit these squares so that they could quickly tie the squares or this long piece of thing that they've knitted around and just really quickly sew it so that the tree was dressed in a sweater almost of their creation, or the
cool.
handrail was dressed in. And I thought that was really sweet. But how cool would it be if somebody made a maypole out of like a light pole by just knitting its giant scarf?
That would weigh a lot less than the other thing we have for the Love Struck in Cologne. They adapted the same tradition that's taken off in a lot of places in Europe after this book that became this sort of romantic book became very popular, and in it the two lovers got a lock and they etched their names on it and they put the lock on a bridge, and that was meant, and then they like threw the key into the river to symbolize their eternal love. And we have the love locks across a really massive bridge, and it's a very impressive thing to see because it's been building up. At first they kept they would come along every once in a while, the city would, and cut them all down, because at this point they've added 2 tons of extra weight to that bridge.
Yes, I saw that in France there was a story that they were taking down that thing because it was too heavy. And when I was in Cincinnati, I was visiting a friend, and we were walking along this bridge, and there were actual signs saying "No locks, please," but right next to the sign are a bunch of locks. So people are ignoring the "Don't put locks on this bridge."
Yeah, that's pretty much what they did here too. They finally gave up on it, and I think they're just coping with it now and figuring out some engineering solutions. But it's actually really beautiful to walk down just as a visual representation, and just the number of locks. I don't really know what the rules are. Like, if you break up, does one of you have to go and take it down, or do you get to leave it up? But then if you get in another relationship, do you have to take the old one down before you can put the new one up, or can you just have a whole series of locks? I don't really know the rules, but
it would be cute if you like had like your original lock with your like high school boyfriend, and then each time like one of you got into a relationship, you would lock the new one to the old one to the bridge. And so like there would be these 2 branches and then more branches coming off of that other lock.
You know what? Or another variant on that is like get a really long ass lock and put your name at the top, and then just like have John whatever, and then when John a line through it, and then like like George, and then a line through it, then Jose, and then a line through it, and just that would be a good joke lock. I should have that made.
Yes, just take it to the I don't know, the etching company that you have there.
Yeah. Oh, that would just be good for the laughs.
Yep. And every time a new guy comes along, you're like, you have that lock like mounted on the wall. It's like your name will go right there.
Yeah. No, I just think that would be actually like as a comedy lock. I would just do that for the comedy effect of it. I just think that would I'd have to use German names though. It would be more for the culture, be more impactful. But yeah, just this idea of a really long lock and this series of names being crossed out. That would be good.
That would be pretty funny. Yeah, I'm going to run to the bathroom, so I don't know when I come back if we're going to end this or move on to something else, but
I guess we'll find out. Yes, comfort break, that's absolutely fine. So I am doing okay, so I won't have to take a break. So those of you in the chat, if there is any topics that you want us to bring up, there'll be a little bit of a lag. So we can check for that. But if you had any more questions, for instance, I mean, having a very good time. Sometimes it feels like we have a dip and we don't really know where to go from there. And I think, did we start at 8 o'clock? Yeah. Okay. So 2.5 hours. That's a decent enough hangout. That's a pretty long hangout. You guys in the chat having a good time. I've been having a very good time in this conversation. Very much enjoying it. I think this is the only thing that could have improved it is if we were sat in a cozy English pub over half pints. Actually, what I would prefer is a cranberry and orange. No, sorry, cranberry and vodka. Or an orange and vodka. That's why I said cranberry and orange. Cranberry and orange and vodka. I don't know if that would taste good. I guess it would depend on how sour the orange is because the cranberry is quite bitter. So if there was a sort of artificially sweet orange cranberry mix, that might balance out nicely on top of the vodka. All of you in the chat haven't said anything. You all suck.
I have returned with beer.
I am speculating on, I was commenting that the only thing that could have made our chat nicer was if we were in an English pub somewhere, nice sort of cozy pub, and I had a half pint of cranberry and vodka, but then I also talked about orange and vodka, screwdriver. And then I was trying to decide if a cranberry and orange with vodka would taste really good, or if the sour in the orange would just make the bitter in the cranberry worse.
How about just abandon the vodka and become a good beer drinker instead?
Leave the spirits behind. I drink a lot of Kolsch here, so I have become a consumer of the local beverage that they put out. So
I'm trying to get the camera to focus, but I don't think it will. Oh. Okay. Maybe. So this is Tatamagouche. It's a Nova Scotia brewery. It's amazing. And this beer is a pale ale. It's called Hippy Dippy.
Nice. Did you get it because you've had it before, or did you get it because the name was pretty clever?
We love Tatamagouche. We have when I say that I'm a beer snob in my description, I'm not joking. I think we plan our destination based on breweries. So when we go somewhere, we'll plan the route that allows us to stop at the maximum number of stores that carry rare beer or import beer or breweries that we want to visit. And it's really lame, but it's really fun.
I don't think it's lame at all. Actually, I was recently in the UK doing field research, and I was in Bristol, and a person who lived there was putting me up, and the group of us went out for dinner. But before we went to dinner, we went to a microbrew. Basically, there was a place that had opened, and they were brewing their own beer. Also, when I was in Colchester on the same field research, there's a place there. I'll give it a little shout out. I think the Three Wise Monkeys. Something like that. Sorry. Anyway, it's on the high street. You can't miss it. But they also have a lot of local, like sort of specialty brewed beers. And that phase, I remember in the 90s, microbrews became a really big thing, and probably too in Canada, I would imagine. You start like people could actually do the technology in their own house to brew beers, and restaurants started brewing it. That really didn't hit the UK so much. There's like a lot of traditional drinks that people have had, but it seems, at least from my experience, traveling around, there's a lot more independent brewers now who are not just producing one kind of beer, but will experiment with different types of, and also do seasonal beers, and then have some that are, and they have their, like, some places are hiring their own brewmasters. You know, they have them on site, and then they just whip up the staples that everyone knows and loves, but then does something special, you know, for different seasons or whatever. So that, you know, you could try that. I can recommend at least Bristol and Colchester, but only for the beer. I can't. Colchester is a bit. I love it and I hate it. Like Colchester.
I don't know how familiar you are with synthwave, but it's something that we're very much into over here. The best way to describe it is electronic music merged with 80s rock. So kind of like the soundtrack of Stranger Things or the soundtrack of Tron. That's kind of what synthwave is. And so there's this band that we really want to go see. They've never ever toured. They're called Gunship, and they're in the UK. So we're actually another couple synthwave guys are performing. That's how we end up in Montreal a lot, because that's where they tour Toronto and Montreal when they come to Canada. So we're thinking we should wait until a gunship tour in the UK, and then we do a trip to the UK to see Gunship with a tour of all microbreweries that we can possibly fit in, and that'll be
Do it.
that'll be our trip.
You won't regret it. You won't regret it. Do it. Yeah.
I was actually born in the UK. We spent the first, and even Jordan, he lived there at the same time. We actually lived in the same neighborhood around the same age at the same time in England. His dad was managing a golf course. That's why he moved a lot. And I was staying with my grandparents during the first years of my life while my parents were setting up fish farms on the Mediterranean. And so, like, we were probably playing in the same playgrounds or, like, being walked in our trolleys by each other, but like we would have no recollection of that, which is kind of cute.
Have you seen When Harry Met Sally?
Yes.
You know that scene, like, I lived on 22nd Street, he lived on 25th, we did this, we never met. And that was you guys.
Yeah. Our friends have a very similar, adorable story. They just got married this year, so it's a common thing these days to apparently create a website for your relationship when you're getting married, and you tell your story, and you have an RSVP page, and apparently, like, it's a thing.
I can see having a place to respond instead of sending out an invitation. That the rest of it I could do it. I'm just too old fashioned. Like, I couldn't be bothered with setting up a website. But if I could RSVP to weddings without actually having to deal with the things that it's printed on, that actually would be great, because they're beautiful, but they're like a pain in the ass.
But she's a graphics designer, so that's probably like why theirs was so pretty. But they were telling the story of how they met, and just like how I met my partner online, they met on the same website, and how, like, they actually, like, worked in buildings where their desks faced the same wall, so that if she had a window, like her building had a window, if there was a window in front of his desk, they would be looking at each other. And they spent years working literally across from each other before they met, which is really cute.
I wonder if they sort of were psychologically primed to recognize each other because of just incidental subconscious registering the other person.
Oh, like standing in line at a coffee shop? That would be just pretty, like, cool.
Oh, hi. Yeah. Like Rear Window, but with a happy, with like a good ending kind of thing. Yeah, that's a really nice story. I mean, I've seen those kinds of videos done at the weddings themselves, when they put the compilations together and they do the kids' pictures when they were kids and growing up, and then when they started dating and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. I don't know if they keep doing it. I mean, I haven't been to a wedding in ages because most of my family are in the States, and so I never get invited. But yeah, those are nice. I don't want to trash people who put their weddings up online. I just I'm too old-fashioned for that. But
do you
it sounds
get
like
to go back to the States often, or do you stay in Europe mostly?
Maybe every 16 to 18 months. And also occasionally I'll have family come and visit me here. But it's a long way to go. I mean, like a 7-hour trip was definitely going to, for me, 2 days of jet lag each way. And I can't just sort of land and go into work the next day. I kind of like, need, so that means that I have a longer than, so if I want to be there for, any length of time to make it count, I have to go for a longer period of time. And that means I have to, like, to set up my work. And so, but it's weird how now America feels like the foreign country. I see American TV shows. It looks foreign to me in that the roads look so big and the cars look so big and these massive parking lots. And I'm not saying that there aren't parking lots in Germany or in Europe, but they're more in the suburbs, and I live in the cities. And so I see very small cars and narrow streets and small apartments. So it's weird to see your homeland but not recognize it in that way. I don't know if that makes any sense. But when you watch a foreign film and you've never been to a European country, like you see the really small cars driving down Italy and in cobblestone streets, and it just looks like that's a foreign place. Like, that's how America now looks to me.
We when we owned our first car, or any car really, as a family with 3 kids, my parents just owned regular cars that had car seats in them. And so like to me that's just normal. But then you look at like this culture where my friends are now having kids and they all need like SUVs so that you can fit the kid in, you can fit your groceries in, you can fit like a family of 12 in, even though you have a family of 4. And it blows my mind.
Yeah. But you lived abroad, so, or you were born abroad and then you moved. So maybe when you came over, you also had that sort of experience of having slight cultural displacement because of the expansive nature of both Canada, and the US in that way. But then at some point, Europe and those norms became, that's somewhere else far away and I live here now. Or maybe
I
we
miss
were too
it.
young.
I miss it a lot. Like sometimes when I realize that because I take a moment and I wonder like why something looks weird to me, and then I realize it's my European upbringing, not the actual weirdness of the Canadian habit.
I think it's difficult when you've lived more than one place. You're always homesick for somewhere.
Yep, there's a word for that in German. Being homesick for a place you've never
Heimweh.
been. What?
I think I don't. You're right, but the only one I know is homesickness, which is Heimweh. But I'm sure somebody in the chat or in the comments will say that what the actual German word is. But yeah, longing for a place or missing a place you've never been, but
My
or
favorite
haven't visited in
favorite
a long time.
Sorry, my favorite German word of all times is one I just recently learned. Walter Obscherkeit, and I'm probably mispronouncing it.
What is the meaning of it? Because it's not one I recognize. My German's not that great.
It's I know, yes, you're right, but you don't have to be an asshole about it.
My favorite German word for a while, there's a lot of them, but my most favorite one is actually quite short. It's the German for thingamajig, and it's Dingsbums.
Oh, so it's a bunch of sounds.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's a neutral. It's not feminine or masculine. So it's das Dingsbums. Yeah. So if I say, please, give me that thingamajig. Kannst du mir das Dingsbums geben? But what's fun about the word is that it's got these consonants. It really, dinks. That makes it a lot of fun. Say it.
Dingsbums. It sounds cute, like a little kid's Dingsbums.
Yeah, and I was reflecting, a colleague of mine today had just struggled with the word months. And I realized the extent to which that's actually a very complicated series of sounds to put together if you're not used to having the TH and the S, because there's a soft S in German, but the TH isn't in there. So in the word months, to properly pronounce it, you've got the N, the th, and the s at the end of it, and it's actually quite deft to do that with your tongue if you're not a native-born speaker.
Yep, my mom has been living in English-speaking countries longer than she's lived in Israel. That's where she was born and raised, and now everybody's gonna be like, "Oh, the dirty Zionist." Believe me, I've gotten that from the conservatives sometimes. And so like my mom, she still speaks with an accent and still fucks up words that are super regular. She messes up sentences that are so easy. It's either because she's not trying or just because she was, I think, 18. No, she was 20 when she left Israel. So maybe it was too late for her to adopt better speaking patterns. But we make fun of her all the time in the family, even my dad, which is kind of cruel, but that's our sense of humor. She says things like, where for you to go now, when she means like, so you're going out, where are you going?
Right. I had a friend that was Germans generally just want you to correct them. They really helped me a lot in being brave enough to speak German poorly, because I just admit to it. They're like, yeah. I'm like, it's okay, I know. But she would ask me to correct her English. And eventually I just had to give up, because it didn't make a difference. She in her head had so long sort of spoken certain phrases in English, typically as a direct translation from German, that she wasn't able to remember it was wrong. So one of the things was always that she'd say, well, I was, I'm gonna look at the TV tonight. And I would say, watch. And she, okay, what's the difference between looking at something and watching it? And the only distinction I could come up with was to say, well, when you look at something, it sort of implies the thing is static. Like, you're looking at a painting or you're looking over there. But if you're watching something, then it's probably moving, right? Like a TV show or a film or a baseball game or something. You watch it because it's in progress. So I tried to come up with this really good explanation so that it made sense, the difference between the two words. And then she just kept saying she's going to look at the, she's going to look at the TV. It didn't matter. So maybe that's too, it just seems to be locked in. And then it's just there.
I try to work on my Spanish every time I visit a Spanish-speaking country. And I like it. I tell people, like, correct my Spanish, teach me stuff, go slower so that I can speak actual, like, Spanish with you instead of going so fast. But it's tough. It's an uphill battle. And every time you leave the country and you re-immerse in English, it's so hard to get back to that point that you were when you left the Spanish-speaking country. And it's the same with Hebrew. I've known Hebrew since I was 7 years old. And it's still hard for me sometimes to speak to my aunts and uncles and cousins and people in Hebrew, because it's kind of like you get stuck. Like, I know this word. What is it?
Oh, I noticed it was terrible. So, j'étudiais le français à l'école et l'université. And I went to Paris and I did quite a lot of study of French. And basically that sentence is about the only thing I can remember in French anymore, because now every time I sort of want to reach for a French word, when I try to think of French phrases, German comes out. It lost, like, my French as a consequence of learning German. Now I've got, it's amazing the number of people that I know who speak more than 2 languages. I mean, it puts me to shame as an American that I know people who speak 4 languages well enough to get by a day-to-day life. And anyway, but he said that the key to that is, when you're learning a 3rd language, your brain coped with learning a 2nd language by creating a 2nd language drawer, a foreign language drawer, and it put everything in that other drawer, and you just go to that drawer when you need those words. And because that's how your brain sort of learned it, when you learned your 2nd language, when you learn a 3rd one, it still puts all those words kind of in the same drawer. But if you only use them over and over again, you get used to those. So he said, what you need to do is get really good in your 3rd language and then go back and re-immerse yourself in your 2nd language. Because all you have to do is remind yourself now. Like, it's still there. It's still sitting. I can feel it. Like, when people speak French, I can understand a lot of what they say. But when I go to reach for the words, I can't find them. And so that's my plan, and probably not for another 2 or 3 years. My German's not good enough to abandon my French or to start my French up again just yet. But it is very fascinating the way that language functions inside of the brain, and what stays and what goes. And also, like you said, immersion is the best, and you would be able probably to remember a lot if you were immersed in it. Things that you've forgotten outside of the situation, you would remember because it would just kind of come back to you.
I used to speak Greek fluently to the point where my parents, because a young person picks up a new language so quickly, and as an 8-year-old, I was the one leading my parents into the market, and we lived in such small communities building these fish farms that it was funny. We would be walking into the market, and the Orthodox Catholic Greek people who had never, ever, ever met a Jew in their life before us would say, "Oh, look, the Jews are coming." Like, in Greek, like, not in a bad way, but like, "Oh, the Jewish family are here." Which, like, it's funny because it's like, oh, they don't mean it in a negative way. It's just like, oh, the Jews are here. So I would be the one actually negotiating the price of tomatoes and cucumbers and bread at the market for my parents, because I could speak it more fluently and faster than they could. But I don't remember more than 4 or 5 words in Greek. But when I hear Greek being spoken, there's a part of it echoing in my brain like a deep, dark fog, because I stopped using it around when I was 10 years old.
But you're right, those echoes are still there. Like, your brain still has the one thing, the hardest thing for me to learn in German starting out was when I would be confronted with a compound noun where they put 2 or 3 words together in a single series of letters. Now, to native Germans, they know how to break those words up. But to me, because I didn't know any of the words were, I didn't know where the breaks were. And so learning those breaks was actually the first part of me really getting to grips with the German language. And I think it's sort of the similar probably with you, because you had those memories, those skills, those synapses were formed that I would speculate wildly, but I think not without some justification, that you are looking for those patterns of when one word stops and another word begins, and trying to figure out where the things are in the sentence. At least that's what I find myself doing with German. I'll be following along, and then I'll just have a blob of somebody will be speaking German, and I'll be following along word 1, 2, 3, 4, and then they say something I don't know, and I lose. It just goes blah 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 to me. Or I hear a word, and then I have to try to remember what the two parts of the word mean together, so there's these sort of gaps in it. But my brain gets better and better at that. And I'm just kind of wondering if that's sort of similar to what you kind of fear, that fog of a half-remembered dream of, if I can just sort of, it would come back to me.
When I was in New Zealand, I was traveling in New Zealand for a year, and the amount of Germans that travel is amazing. And so I met these couple Germans that I worked on an organic farm with for a good week or so. And they would always laugh at me because I would insist on trying to put together German words in the way that you're talking about. I had no idea. I've never studied the language. I just wanted to take little words, learn how to pronounce them in German, and try to kind of put them together and stick them together and see what worked and what didn't. And it was great because there was one time that it rained really bad, and so there was just this wheelbarrow full of gross water, and so I said to this girl, Kira, I was like, Kira, careful, that's Scheisewasser. She'd be like, what? I'm like, das ist Scheisewasser. And she just didn't understand what I was saying, but it made sense. That is garbage water or shit water. Don't
shit
touch
water.
it.
Yeah. Literally poop water. Yeah, shit water.
Yep.
Yeah.
But it's not a German word. And she would get a good entertainment from me. She was reading this book. She handed me the book. Of course, German is written in English, those are English letters. So
same letters.
So she said, read this to me. And as I'm reading this and stumbling over myself, she's laughing her ass off in the bed next to me.
Well, the thing is, it is a German word, because this is the thing about compound nouns. You could literally not have a dictionary of all the words in German, because people can make up words on the fly. So I tested this out. I asked a friend of mine, is there a way to say having lunch on the rooftop? Because we have a rooftop sort of area. Yeah, not a patio or garden or whatever. It's just an open area, it opens this, you can go out there and sit, And she's like, yeah, it would be Terrasse Mittagessen. So that would be literally, that would be one noun to describe having lunch on the rooftop. Actually, it would be rooftop lunch, eat food, literally. But yeah, and that's you couldn't look that up in a dictionary, but that's a completely valid German word. And so is Scheissewasser. You just need to know that it's Wasser. I don't know if it's das Wasser or der Wasser. You just need to know the gender of the last noun in order to give it the correct article. You can construct a sentence. Yeah, you can literally put any words together in German. And
I learned so much about German while traveling in New Zealand, which sounds so weird. But I learned that it's Wasserfall and Regenbogen, rainbow, waterfall, these things make total sense in English. They're the same thing.
Right. Yeah. Our languages are basically cousins, and linguistically, we both. So the Germanic roots sort of came into the English language with the Anglo-Saxons, and then you had the sort of the Norman French, and you had more influences in English. But yeah, you have a lot of Vater, father, Wasser, water, Brot, bread, butter. I mean, if someone says to you, do you know the German word for penguin? Just guess whatever they say is a penguin. And because that was the only time someone's going to ask you what a German word is, or if you know what a German word is and they say it, it's going to be the same damn thing in English. And even with medical terms, lots of things are basically different pronunciations of the same ancient root language.
Yep. It's amazing.
So I'm just going to say this, that sometimes people say, oh, we have, or you have that word too, or you have that word in English. It's no, actually, because sometimes they do. Germans do take a lot of technology words in, but The way people phrase it sometimes is when they hear a German word that sounds like English, they're like, oh, you have the English word for this. They're like, no, actually, in that case, that's the same word just pronounced by two different peoples. So
Yep.
that was the only point I was going to make.
The actual Hebrew language was dead for many, many centuries. And so when it was revived, it became a bastardized language. Like the Hebrew that I speak today is, it's a combination of Aramaic, which they could still figure out how it was supposed to be pronounced, with a very small amount of later influenced Arabic words. So Hebrew has very little Arabic influence other than the Aramaic base language, because the Hebrew language that is like the modern Hebrew is actually revived by a guy named Eliezer ben Yehuda, who was like, he had French. So what he did was every time he couldn't figure out how to make a word in Hebrew, he would put the word in French in. So if you try to speak Hebrew, a lot of the times when you're trying to explain a word, you'll find that you're taking this Aramaic-based language that shares, like Hebrew and Arabic are pretty much sister languages, but then modern Hebrew is infused with French, which is a Latin language. It's like this bastardized conglomerate, which is impossible to learn. I don't know how people do it.
I don't know if you've ever heard this, and it might be total bunk, but I saw a video series by a guy who sounded like an autodidact, a self-taught person on ancient Hebrew. And his basic thesis was that when we read the ancient Hebrew now, we read it through we've been reading it through the lens of Greek philosophy. And the Greek philosophies that is alien to the actual text is the notion of abstract concepts. And in his thesis is that ancient actually meant to be taken entirely literally. There were no so a concrete thing, he talks about the translation of good and evil in the King James Bible of the ancient language, that God had put in the middle of the garden the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Good and evil as universal sort of cosmic moral questions. There's a lot of abstract concepts that go along with this. What something good is a quality that is expanding. You could put it onto a lot of things. And he said that what is a better representation would be like the word of functioning. When you take out a piece of technology and you open it and it works, it's functioning the way it's meant to. And when it crashes, it's dysfunctioning. It's not doing what it's meant to do. And so he said, and he has this whole sort of like approach where he translates the Bible to be to be completely free of abstract concepts and make everything concrete, everything related to experience in life. And then in that case, the tree would be the tree of the knowledge of what it means to function properly and what it means to not do that. And I don't know if that distinction makes the sense to you, but I find it really a fascinating idea.
There's an entire sect of Judaism called the Karaim, which Kara means to read. So the Karaim are all about the literal reading of the Bible, and they're not fans of the. I don't know how familiar you are with Islam and Judaism, but like in Islam you've got the Quran, and you've got the surahs, which are like the subsections of the Quran, to like interpreting the Quran. And in similarity, you've got in Judaism, you've got the Bible, and then you've got the not the, oh god,
the oral law?
The
oral law?
Not the oral law, but it's oh god damn. Come on, Dusty, help me out here, fellow Jew. The Torah and
these are commentaries.
They're rabbis that interpreted the law in a way, interpreted the Bible and the scrolls to create Jewish law, and that's where it comes from. But the Karaim disavow all of this translation. They only literally read the First Testament, and there's only about a few thousand of them left living in Israel. But it's great because in as a religious Jewish person, you're not allowed to create anything on the Sabbath. Like, that's the translation. But the literal writing in the Bible is do not light a fire. So what they're saying is do not work on the Sabbath, do not build fires, do not cook food, do not go hunting, do not do anything that requires anything but the worship of God and the spending time with family. So the Karaim, they're religious Jews, but they don't light fires, but they do turn electricity on and off because that's not a fire. So they're literally reading the Bible.
You know, I love this the various workarounds. This sort of the spirit of the law, like the argument you made in front of the judge. I was told while I was visiting Tel Aviv, which is a great city. I really enjoyed my time. I didn't see Israel. I won't say Israel, but at least in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, that there's the rule about the hooves of pigs shouldn't touch the soil of Israel. And so when the state of Israel was created, there was this sort of demand for pork, but obviously there's a prohibition here that would need to be observed. So the solution for people who were pig farmers who weren't necessarily Jews but wanted to farm pigs, so it was it wasn't, it was about the land of soil of Israel. They built platforms up 6 inches on wooden platforms and had the pigs on those.
It's all about that.
Part of this, another thing, I was actually like, I couldn't be a monotheist, but I always came away with respect for certain elements of Judaism, and certainly the story, and it was apocryphal, no doubt, but it's a story about 2 rabbis having a dispute. And one of the rabbis says, if I'm right, let the water in the well splash up, and God sort of splashes up the water in the well, but the people side with the other rabbi, and they may have their debate some more. And then the one rabbi arguing says, if God agrees with me, let the walls of this church be bent. And so the walls, got bent, and they only bowed though because they respected both rabbis, so they didn't break all the way. They just bowed a little bit, so you could tell. And then eventually, like, the people kept siding with the other rabbis, and the reply came back, like, in terms of why this was because God had given the people Torah, but once it was given up to the people to interpret God's law, and God sort of laughed, "My children have defeated me." And that particular story of God laughing that his own children sort of outwitted him by following his rules, like that kind of really summed up the part of Judaism that I admired the most.
And that's what also, I don't understand when I'm speaking with Christians and they say, oh, the First Testament God is a ruthless, evil, mean, angry, mean-spirited God, and the Second Testament God is a forgiving, loving God. And I'm thinking about all of this Bible study that I went through and all these Jewish teenage excursion as I went on, and God is always painted as this jolly old man that is just like chilling, like laughing at you for everything that you do, and doesn't really give a shit as long as you accept him as the God of everything. That's it.
Yeah, this so I'm actually really fascinated by the Bible and have continued to look into it and learn about it over the last, probably going on, sadly, 25 years now. There's a fantastic Yale course given by Dr. Christine Hayes on the Hebrew scriptures. I prefer to say the Hebrew scriptures and the Christian scriptures, because the Testament, New and Old thing, that's like AD and BC. It's like, you're like, well, let's just talk about things on their own terms, not how one group sees them. But through that course, and I almost wish actually there would be this level of educated analysis of the Hebrew scriptures in schools in America. And it wouldn't be a religious indoctrination, because the one thing that I really took away from listening to her course is that those books are the history of a people. And it's not just the history, it's like an ancient culture. If we can divest, and I can kind of step away from seeing either the Christian or the Hebrew scriptures as religious texts and see them as acts of human history, right, along with Confucius or anyone else, stop, kind of de-emotionalize them and just look at them from a more academic, historical perspective. The Hebrew scriptures are fascinating. We don't have anything else like it in terms of centuries it covers, the theological and disagreements that it records, the narrative building of a sense of identity, and then also a set of moral principles that, you know, you can say whatever you want about monotheism. The one remarkable thing that Judaism really contributed to society was this idea of combining laws with a moral ethic. We had people, not we weren't born yet, but people had Hammurabi's code. They had legal ways of structuring society in order to keep the peace, as it were. But because Judaism did take that extra step in making charity and taking care of the women and poor not only like part of society, but a moral obligation, this was, I think, a major moral step forward in human empathy evolution. We can also look at this in Buddhism does many of the same things. And to deny that contribution, I think, is to deny part of our progress. So we have to, in my opinion, no one has to, I try to approach these texts not only from a position of being an anti-theist, which I am because I'm quite critical of in things that I don't see any evidence for, but I don't also want to say they have no value in understanding who we are as Western civilization, really.
What I find fascinating about Judaism and the history and the history, however accurate or inaccurate in the books, is the approach to women. And people always talk about the Jewish question, and if Jews are such a small group, like, why do they control everything and all that stuff, right? But what they don't understand is that the education of Jewish children is built into the tradition of Judaism, which is why Jews have been such a successful group of people throughout history, because women are told in the interpretations of the Torah, they're told to leave a certain percentage of their household income aside for the purpose of educating their children. So no Jew has ever been, no Jew who has been part of a family that follows the religion has been illiterate, because they've always been able to read the language and therefore participate in a higher class than the regular serf working man. Sorry, Punk, the barking dogs. So that's the thing, that women were given a lot of autonomy that wasn't really offered to many other women in the same societies. So Jewish women were given this responsibility of educating their children. Jewish women themselves were educated in reading and writing, which is something that a lot of women didn't get until a lot longer after men did, of becoming able to read and write. And so the whole thing, plus the fact that women were given autonomy over the household, it's very clear in the Jewish scripture that a man is responsible for the moral salvation of his family. So it's his job to go to synagogue 3 times a day, to pray with other men, to perform duties in the community outside the home. But once he steps into the home, it's his job to provide for the woman, and it's the woman's job to manage the entire household. So that division of labor was very egalitarian in that sense, that a woman was given her domain and a man was given his domain. And there was a respect that the man gave to the woman of surrendering his power within the household.
I think that's very interesting. And one of the things that I also, being a lover of history, I've noticed is that increasingly I'm seeing, traditionally the historical books have focused on the great men of history and things like that. And also Gwen No Fear made a comment that I wanted to come up because she's right, and I want to bring this up too. But now that you have more women historians, and I'm going to create a direct correlation, you have a lot more books detailing the lives of women in Tudor periods. They're reconstructing them through their legal encounters. And you do find that whatever the official laws were on the books were responsible for, or in relationships or with men who had to manage a lot of things, having a woman who was well educated and could keep your books and help you out as a partner, as a business partner, was really, really helpful. And sometimes she could have relationships with other people and work things out. So a lot of these informal relationships actually had, you know, a place in people's ordinary lives. Now, if things were taken to court, then you would be in a legal situation where maybe only the men could testify. But informal practices, have varied by the couple and the situation that they're in. But certainly that is, something that I wasn't aware of, and it's very interesting to learn. The other thing that, coming back to Gwen No Fear's comment in the chat, there's actually two things we can look at. The reason why, I'm actually going to start with the second one. The reason why there are so many Chinese restaurants in America. This was another little Vox video that I thought was absolutely fascinating. It comes out of policies that were enacted for immigration after the building of like the Great Transatlantic Railroad and the great influx of Chinese residents into California and the western part of the United States. There was a backlash, and Congress passed a law basically saying that you couldn't on a work permit, their version of a work permit, and anything to do with construction or like building the railroads or anything like that. There were very few industries that were open that you could actually have a Chinese worker work in and have a work permit. One of them was the restaurant industry, and they actually started bringing in more people to work in the restaurant industry. But there were also laws in the books that said that in order to buy a restaurant, you couldn't have what the Chinese started to do was pool their assets and then buy another restaurant and then sponsor members of their family to come over on work permits, and then they would get enough money and pool it and build another restaurant. So the law, though, at the time said that they couldn't do that on their own. They had to have a white man sign off on it. So they would form these consortiums of Chinese businesses and then have a front man who was a white man, and his job was basically to sign the paperwork so that they could open another business. And this is why Chinese restaurants are everywhere across the United States. It's not because American people absolutely love Chinese food. They did learn to love Chinese food because it's awesome, but it wasn't like the demand was driving the investment was made and then the business would succeed or not, and then it would reproduce. And similarly, to Gwen's point, finally, because of the usury laws in medieval Christianity that prohibited people from charging interest on money, as with still, not being able to light a fire, right? Well, I can do that. That's not lighting a fire, but you can't do it. To get you to do it, people who studied maybe history will already know this, but Jews were some of the few people who could lend money at interest. And so they were absolutely vital in the mercantile businesses, in creating backing the financial industries that sent off the ships to different parts of India to collect the spices to come back. The whole financial backbone of the expansion of Europe was provided by the Jewish communities because they were the only ones who could do it, and they did it, and they did a damn good job of it. But nobody likes to owe money. And then there was the minority group.
Which is why they were then identified as like a horrible group that needed to be, like, nobody likes bankers. Bankers,
yeah. But they also are a necessary part of moving around capital in a capitalist system so that, new industries can start and maybe take off. So, yeah, I mean, you couldn't have had that kind of the revolution with all the ships and all that stuff if it was only Christians, because they wouldn't have been able to loan money to each other. So of course, then that's where you'd get tracked, just like Chinese immigrants ended up sort of being tracked by the system they found themselves in. That was the same situation. So you can't then turn around and say, hey, I'm mad at you because you have all the money, but of course you can't do anything else. You can't have it both ways.
Jews were pretty much banned from any form of government because they were so hated for the fact that they were lending out money with interest. So it was like you can't be a lawyer, you can't be a lord, you can't be born into lordship because you're a Jew. I mean, even during the turn of the century, during the first sexual revolution with women, where women were allowed to say no to a marriage, began to be able to say no to a marriage. Even then, marrying a Jew, even if he was from a prominent a banker family or trade family, even then it was like, what are you doing? You're letting your daughter marry a Jew? Are you crazy?
Yeah, and there's also, of course, just like slavery is America's original sin, anti-Semitism is Christianity's original sin. The break from a subset of a widely contested Jewish community. There's always quite a lot of theological disputes, as I've learned, going on within Judaism, going all the way back. And Christianity started off as one of those, but when they broke away, they became very bitter. It's sort of like the breakup hate you. And the anti-Semitism that was put into some of the, especially the John and parts of Matthew, were seized upon the Christian church, the Catholic church especially, and people who were Catholic in order to create an other, blame, and to scapegoat, which ironically, of course, the term scapegoat was a practice developed by the Hebrews.
Yes, you would take a goat and you would put all of the sins of the community on the goat. You would send the goat out into the wilderness to be slaughtered or die of thirst and lack of food.
We still have that practice in Cologne. I say we like I'm a native Kölnerin, but in Cologne at Carnival, it's 5 days of debauchery, 5 days of nonstop drinking, people dressed up in costumes, being merry. It's also very common practice to sort of really let, if you see someone and they give you a drink and you want to say thank you and you kiss them on the lips, that's okay. So Carnival is a very free time here. But at the end of Carnival, so it always happens right before the start of Lent, which starts on Ash Wednesday. So at midnight on the Tuesday, having started on the Thursday before, they go to the pub and go at midnight, they do some songs, and then they put all their sins on the Nubel. And the Nubel is basically a straw man. It's basically a sort of stuffed person. And you're like, I kissed my best friend's girlfriend. It's the Nubel's fault. I drank away my rent money. It's the Nubel's fault. So everybody puts all of their sins on the Nubel, and then they take it out and they sing a song. And actually, like, one of the parades goes right down my street, so I can always hear the Nubel him, oh, he's going off, and then they set him on fire, and everyone's sins are expunged, and then you're clean for Ash Wednesday the next day to go to church.
My friend has actually adopted. Sorry.
No. I was just saying it's still going on, like that Hebrew practice from literally 6,000-7,000 years ago.
Of putting your sins onto something. My friend Laura she comes from a Catholic family, and she does this thing. When we were traveling in New Zealand, we met on a boat that was really a hostel. Don't ask. If any of you are ever traveling to New Zealand, I'll hook you up. But we met there, and we had to do Lent during in New Zealand, and she was very, like, she was I want to say an anti-theist. Like, she was a theism hate, like, bubble when I met her. Now she's more of like like, that's a stupid thing.
Yeah. Everyone goes through that angry atheist phrase. It's like the angry Christian writing John phase. Like, I hate you. I hate everything about you.
Yeah, so I met her when she was in that phase. So I could barely drag her to church because, like, I had never been to church during Easter before. And I thought, oh, I have a Catholic. Like, now I get to go to church during Easter. So we went to an Anglican church for the Friday because it was like this sad, like, it felt like a funeral. Everybody's wearing like these big, like, black jackets. There's like a little boy choir. It sounds angelic and sad. So that was awesome for me. She's sitting there like wanting to die. And then the Monday,
oh.
Yeah, like, what am I doing here? And the Monday, we went to a Catholic church for the resurrection of Christ, and I got that little wafer and the wine for the first time in my life, and I was like barely holding myself together, not giggling when we had to get on our knees, like, oh, please, Jesus, forgive me, and all of the singing of like, he rises up, and it was great because the songbook was printed in Aramaic and in English, and I'm like translating the Hebrew to be like, that's not what this says, and that's not what this says, and that's not what this says.
Go off.
So we did that, and I took her to Passover dinner at the Jewish Center, and both of us are atheists at the time, but we were just enjoying each other's cultures. Now she's adopted that kind of fun with culture thing, and the way she does Lent is she takes something that she absolutely loves and she gives it up for a month, not for Jesus, but because she wants to show herself that she's able to exercise that kind of restraint. So while we were in New Zealand, she gave up Tim Tams for a month, and she was addicted to Tim Tams. You can't get them in the States, which is why I send them to her from here. But now she'll give up like chocolate, or she'll give up ice cream, or she'll give up coffee, which is a terrible idea because she's a construction worker.
Oh, mornings are bad without coffee.
Yeah.
Especially early mornings. Yeah, but that whole idea of fasting, very ancient. There's something that, you know, people find not necessarily like fasting hardcore, but that sort of like purging or conscious giving up, the challenge of it, and the consciousness raising of it, being reminded of something. Yeah, I think again it speaks to something. I don't always understand our psychology, but I find a lot of it fascinating. So I'm going to say it's going on 11:30 here.
Jesus, go to bed, old lady.
You're almost, yeah. This has been such a really nice chat. I've really enjoyed it. And I'm just curious, like, we've talked about a wide range of topics. This is probably,
Yes.
if I'm putting my hands, I'm going to put my hands up and say probably one of the most intelligent, you know, like in terms of like your understanding of Judaism and me being able to talk about my understanding of it too. I don't actually have those conversations very often, and your perspective was really fascinating. I don't know if you've had a lot of these conversations with the shitlord community, but
No,
like
not
I really
really.
enjoy talking.
Most of the time it's with them. I honestly, and I'm not shitting on them at all. It's just like the reality of what being in the shitlord community is. It's a lot of social climbing. So it's a lot of like you start having like an intelligent conversation with somebody, and then someone else realizes like, oh, I can get Kraut and Tea on here. Like he has more subs than me. I can get more subs out of that. Oh, let's send Kraut and Tea an invite. Then it becomes Kraut and Tea having a monologue on the stream, and the conversation dies.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, we don't really do that on, well, at least, you know, with people on in my group. And I think, you know, anyone who thinks badly of you or thought badly of you, I would challenge them to sit down and watch you on the stream, because you've really, I think it would just put all the rumors to rest, all the accusations, because like I said, you know, you've come across so well. I've had such a pleasant time. You have a real depth and breadth of opinions, and they're not just sort of, you know, random. They're things that you've thought about. And yeah, I've really enjoyed this, and I look forward to doing it again sometime, hopefully in the not too distant future.
Yes, let's do that thing. Come up with the 3 articles or videos that you want to talk about that discuss or have to do with or are an example of rape culture. I'll do the same, and we'll talk and we'll schedule that sometime. Probably after you get back from your travels.
Yes, I would say probably the end of November or the first week of December would be realistic.
Yep. Oh,
And I would think
Dusty said,
yeah.
"What's next to hang out with Shives?" Honestly, I don't think he wants to talk to me. But if we do talk, it's probably just going to be something calm like this.
I think, you know, Gwen No Fear is in the chat. Gwen's great. I think if you wanted to have a conversation with her, you should definitely do that. Again, you know, I'd say Kevin, Lonely Wolf. I think there's a lot of alternatives. And, you know, with you kind of, the Woolly Bumblebee stream obviously will have put you on the radar of a lot of people who might not have otherwise kind of, maybe I'm guesstimating from you know, from like the fact that I don't hear your name, you know, so, and so that might open up a lot of doors to a lot more conversations like this.
And anyone who has anything like negative to say about Wooly or Kristi, and you have something that you want to show me, not just be like, Kristi is this or Kristi did that, and then not link me to anything. If you want to, my DMs are on Twitter are open. You can link me, but I if it hasn't happened, so I really don't think it exists. Like, show me something, anything. Like, don't throw that shit around.
And the same goes to anyone who wants to bring heat, you know, on you, come at me, bro. Like,
no evidence.
Show me what you got. Show me what you got.
All right, Kristi, it's been great. You have a great night, and we'll definitely talk in the future.
Can you hold on? I'm just going to say goodbye to the fans, and then we'll just do a short, proper goodbye after I close out.
Absolutely.
So, all right. Well, those of you, the 24 of you that hung out all the way to the end of the hangout, thanks so much. And thanks for those guys in the chat too. You guys have been fantastic and really lovely to read your comments as well. All that's left to be said is that I've been Kristi. You guys have been awesome. Naomi has been awesome. And so goodbye from me and goodbye from Naomi. Say goodbye.
Bye.